Hey everyone, it is the Enforcer, and another 24 hours in Ukraine has passed, and the country has held overnight, leading us into day 14. And while the sun rises on the 14th day in Ukraine, we're going to cover all of the events that have occurred over the 13th day. Today we'll be starting with a bit of a different order that we're doing. We're going to start off in Moscow, and we're going to move over to the United States, and we're going to cover some of the big move economic decisions that have been made across the world today because they are rather large and very extensive. And then finally, we will go over our usual pattern of talking about the northern Kyiv area of the country, the unknown locations, Sumi, Kharkiv, and finish off with the southern front. And then finally, I'll answer everyone's questions at the end. I've had a lot of requests over the course of today for a way to donate to the channel, and while I don't really want anyone to donate, if you would like to support the channel, which will help us create better content, there is now the option to do so in the chat, although I believe that y'all should probably be supporting Ukraine a little bit more than me, so there's also a link in the description to charitable causes that you can help Ukraine with. So that being said, we're going to cover something huge that's happened in Moscow today, and that's the West is out of business. The Western companies in Russia have closed down all of, or if not most of, the stores that they have in Russia. For example, McDonald's has closed down all 850 locations they have was inside the Russian Federation, along with all other companies like HMM, Tommy Hilfiger, and a whole bunch of other ones. So it's an incredible, unprecedented move that we've never seen before in an economy ever, I can really think of in terms of historical context. So in terms of the West responding to what's happening, it's been very, very strict to the Russians. So I have to say that this is an unprecedented move, and we'll have to see how the Russians react to thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of Russians now being unemployed and being completely devoid of Western goods, which they've grown to be very fond of. Moving on from that, now we're going to hit the big news today across the world, and that's that the United States has banned all Russian oil imports. The US has done something serious here because it turns out that Russia exports 700,000 barrels of oil to the US per day, which is $2.6 billion worth of oil per month. And with $2.6 billion, you could purchase 867 brand new T-80s, or you could pay the salary of 5.2 million privates in the Russian military, or you could decide to buy 63 brand new Su-27 flankers. Now, that is a huge number, and that's a huge infliction on the Russian economy. Although it's around $1.2 trillion, oil exports make up a large deal of their export economy. It's one of the main things that they export, minus timber. So we were looking at a huge economic impact to what the Russians are able to do as far as economically. And on top of that, if we were to compound this over the course of a year, let's say that this sanction stays in place for an entire year, the Russians will have lost $31.2 billion in lost oil sales. And to put that into perspective, their military budget is around $52 billion. So it's nearly 60% of their military budget that they'll be losing in profits per year from the export of oil to the U.S. The European Union has not taken as strong a stance. The Germans closed down the Nord Stream 2 pipeline quite a while ago, actually, but they haven't taken as strong a stance as the United States. And so this will start raising the question in the United States of where will this oil come from? And the current administration will have to decide whether they once again go with a foreign provider of oil or if they start to try and produce domestically. I don't really know which way they're going to lean. It appears that the current administration will start to try and outsource the oil and have it imported, but only time will tell, and we'll have to see what the reaction is to this sudden sanction of Russian oil and a complete embargo on it within the coming days and see what their policies are. Nonetheless, we're going to finally move on to Ukraine, and we're going to talk about something that I've seen interesting today, which is that Russian troops have been spotted in this area. According to a map on the internet that I looked at today to see if this was anything new, this little kind of like finger into Ukraine has existed for quite some time, but I've never found video evidence to support that Russian troops were there. But today, I finally got my first bit of video evidence when the Russian troops were spotted in the village at the very end of that finger. So I'll just let y'all see the video right here. As you can see, Russians are patrolling the town called Bodinivska, I believe. I'm sorry if I butchered that pronunciation. I'm not really good with Ukrainian town names. Moving on from that, we're going to go down to Zhytomyr and to Zhytomyr, I believe is the correct pronunciation. I'm sorry, I'm still trying to work on the pronunciations of these towns. But we can see that there was an oil fire today, as it appears a silo is still burning in Zhytomyr, and it's been doing that for quite some while. The blaze may be out of control at this point, and it may damage a large amount of oil reserves that the Ukrainians had within the city, but we'll have to see how the Ukrainian logistics situation sorts itself out, because we've seen the Russians conduct a large amount of attacks on the oil reserves in Ukraine, but we don't know how much that's actually affected their supply and how much oil they already had stockpiled within the silos. So while the burning of a silo is very impressive on video, we don't really know how much of an effect that will have on Ukrainian logistics overall. So moving on from that, we're going to move on into the area of Kyiv, as where we can see that Ukrainian soldiers, and I'm sharing these pictures today because it appears that the pictures are unambiguous, as in any defining landmarks inside the pictures, and so I'm going to show you all these because these won't give away Ukrainian positions, in my opinion, and I'm going to show you all the Ukrainians entrenched near the front in Kyiv. Quite a battle-hardened group of people. I bet Pavel is probably out there with some of them, and I wish Pavel the best of luck. I know he's probably here in the chat, he's and watching the stream. He's here every single day, and I have to say, I wish him the best of luck. The front around Kyiv, a lot of people are talking about that 40-mile-long convoy may begin to move again, but honestly, I don't really see that happening anytime soon, but who knows, it could go either way. It could go one way or the other. They could either sit there and have the tires dry rot again, or they could actually get well supplied, which I don't see happening due to the figures of how many logistical trucks they need versus how many they have. I don't really think anything's going to happen with that. So finally, moving on down into the area of Kyiv, we can see Poroshenko once again in the capital. While Zelensky is doing a lot of the political pleading to the West about getting more support, Poroshenko appears to be having a very fun time wandering around the city. So here's another picture of him. We've seen a lot of pictures of him. Actually, he seems like a pretty decent guy, although he did have a little bit of election corruption under his administration. He actually seems like a pretty decent guy. He's having a nice laugh with the troops near the front. So it's a very good thing to see that all politicians are doing their part inside of Ukraine to help defend the country. So far today, I haven't gotten any news about the Hostomel Bucha Irpin area. So I don't really think that anything's happened up there. Maybe fighting has had a lull today, or there was a lack of videos. Either way, there's been no information around the area of Kyiv, as it's generally fallen silent. Not due to a lack of communications, I believe it may be due to a lack of conflict. But I'll have to see from Pavel, because he's somewhere in the area, although we don't know exactly where. Moving on to an area near Chutniki, we've seen that more units are heading to Ukraine. It appears to be mostly light tanks, something along the lines of BMDs. So I'll just show you the video. So I'm going to cut it short because you can get the general idea that these are just a whole bunch of light tanks being moved into northern Ukraine, according to the title. So going off of that, here's what I'm going to say. While they're moving in more units, we already know that they're having a hard time supplying the ones currently there. And I actually found out that I've been quoting a statistic from the Wikipedia page a little wrong. While Wikipedia says that there's only 280 active service members in the Russian army, it actually turns out that they're only counting the professional contract soldiers as compared to the conscript soldiers that make up the bulk of the Russian army. And when you include the, let me make sure I say this correctly without going the conscript soldiers, when you actually add those to the figure, you're actually getting up around 700,000 troops. So here's all I got to say about that. The Russians only have 10 logistical brigades, and out of these, divisions, and out of these logistical divisions, they only have 460 trucks in each one. And going off of that, they simply do not have the logistical capability to supply any more forces in Ukraine because they've already run out of that ability quite a while ago, and they're actually in a deficit of several thousand vehicles. And that's why over the previous days, we've seen the Russians bringing in train loads of civilian vehicles to try and fill this gap. And on top of that, they are taking a huge attritional loss of supply vehicles in Ukraine due to the tires rotting, fuel running out, them getting destroyed, due to a whole bunch of reasons. I don't believe the Russian logistical situation will ever improve. And I saw some videos today because I've actually had a bit of time to see what other people are saying, and someone's saying that they're building a fob somewhere up here. And the only thing I can say to that is that if they can't even supply all of their forces around the entire country, where are they finding the supply vehicles to supply a fob? Now, I'm not saying that it's not true or anything. I'm just saying that it seems highly unlikely, considering that their lack of supply vehicles is already causing an issue, that they'd somehow be able to come up with enough supply vehicles to, build a fob, if you know what I'm saying. It just doesn't really make much sense when you think about it, just from a kind of like simple perspective. Maybe there's a possibility that maybe it's a possibility that they're pulling trucks off of the front and stopping them from supplying BGGs to supply this fob, but they have no railhead there, and the Russians rely heavily logistically on railheads and railroads. That's why they have something like 10 railroad divisions in the Russian army that focus entirely on the logistics side of railroad operations, and there are no railheads going into Ukraine, and so there's really no way for them to easily supply that fob, which is supposedly somewhere in this area where my cursor is, without using trucks, and without probably loading these trucks up at Chernihiv, where I left that marker, and driving about a 5-hour trip down to that fob. I don't really see the feasibility in it, but I may be wrong. We'll have to see in the coming days if there actually is a fob there that is well supplied, or if it's just a fob that's there, but it's not really supplied at all. We'll have to see. Moving on to the area of Chernihiv, we've seen that there has been more damaged buildings in Chernihiv overnight. I'll show you all the video. It pretty much speaks for itself. Actually, it's a picture, I'm sorry. The top area of this apartment building was blown out, and you can actually see to the street below from the damage. It's a really interesting picture, especially when you look at it a little bit enlarged, because you can see the entire city from this hole, and I'm just wondering, where in the world did the shell come from to hit this? Because we've seen that there's damage all over. Maybe artillery was coming in and it hit the top, like the upper floors of this building, but I would like to get a more descriptive answer as to how this explosion actually occurred, although I'm sure the Ukrainians have a lot more pressing things to do than figure out how a hole was exploded in one of the top floors of a building in Chernihiv. So moving on from that, we're now going to take a few questions, because we've actually covered everything that happened in the Kyiv area. And so before I take questions, I gotta say, we've got a special guest back. He's one of my moderators. He used to do the questions when this thing blew up the first time, but now I brought him back because it seems like we're going to be staying around this level of viewership. And so everyone welcome Drew back. And what do we got for the first question, Drew?
Alrighty, so this is going to be different than I thought it was going to be at first as far as this super chat things, because you're getting a lot of these rolling through, and we're going to address all of the super chats to be sure. First super chat comes from Yuli Rowe, and please forgive me if I'm mispronouncing any names. Chipped in 20 pounds, which is really awesome, and it says, keep it up and good job, and hope you got some sleep, or hope you slept a bit.
Well, thank you so much for the support. I can't believe you gave 20 pounds. 20 pounds was around 23 US dollars, and I can't believe that people are giving me so much support. I really feel like y'all should be supporting Ukraine a little bit more than me, But I thank y'all so much for the support. It really means a lot to me. You don't even know. I can't believe that you gave 20 pounds to the channel. It's going to help us produce better content in the future, and I thank you so much for the support. You really don't even know how grateful I actually am that people are supporting the channel. So thank you so much. Next question.
Next up is Captain Chris, 1220, chipped in $20 and says, so happy to donate. Thank you for this, and thank you, and good luck, Pavel, who is in the chat today.
Oh my god, I can't believe this. I really can. I got to thank you so much for the support, man, because like I said before, y'all don't know how much this means to the channel, because we're working on trying to figure out how to produce higher quality content, and to do that we have to have a budget, and y'all are actually starting to make it very possible that I can start looking at improving the quality of these streams and the videos that we plan in the future within the coming weeks. So I thank you so much for the support, man. And also thank you so much for telling Pavel good luck out there, because him and me have been talking a little bit. I've been very busy, but I try and talk to him because he's out there. And I actually didn't know he had a Discord. I didn't know his Discord name was a little bit different than his live chat name. So I was talking to him, and he's got some things going on. But I thank you so much for supporting the actual troops on the front line. Thank you very much. Next question.
On that note, Pavel also is present and donated $1, and I asked him to please not do that again.
I wouldn't either. Pavel, save your money so that way you can make sure to keep yourself well taken care of in Ukraine. Don't worry about me. I'm perfectly fine, Pavel. But we're all focusing on you right now. That's why I'm here reporting this news. So you got to make sure never to donate to this channel. Do not do that. All right. I love that you're supportive, but please do not.
All right, next up, and we've got about 5 or 6 more of these ones to get through. Last dude chipped in 100 Canadian and says, "I'm here, I'm back. How's the stream?" Exclamation! Exclamation!
100 Canadian dollars?
I think that's yeah. I don't know that in U.S. dollars, but that's insane.
Oh my god! I think Canadian dollars. I don't even know. I mean, if that's 100 American dollars, oh my god! Thank you, man. Like, oh my god, I'm very happy that you support this channel. Jesus Christ, that's a lot of money. But I thank you so much, man. I can't actually believe you did that to support the channel. I mean, I'm speechless, really. But thank you very much. Next question.
So Tyler Cole chipping in $10 says, Pavel is a patriot, and I'm thankful for having met him here. Thanks to you, the Enforcer, as well.
Well, thank you very much, man, for the support. Once again, I got to thank you. And also thank you for supporting Pavel. Hopefully Pavel will not put any more money into this channel, because while I do love people supporting the channel, he is a soldier currently fighting on the front, and money is incredibly valuable, and I don't want him burning any trying to support the channel in the news. While he does appreciate the news, and I was told that we actually have a large viewership of Ukrainian soldiers over there, I wouldn't like him donating to the channel. You know, they really need the help more than me. And speaking of which, if you're thinking about donating and supporting the channel, while I'll highly appreciate that, I would feel much better if y'all clicked on the link in the description below and found a worthy cause to donate to Ukraine for and support the war effort. But I still thank you all nonetheless for the support. It's incredible. Next question.
Ready for the next one. All right, Austin Zelensky asks, and he chips in $25 and asks, will you eventually cover conflicts in the same way as you have this one? Slava Ukraine.
Slava Ukraina. Yes, I will be covering conflicts in the future. Future conflicts and also prior conflicts like this. They may be in a video format, though, and much more compressed. As far as we're going right now, it may actually be some kind of down the rabbit hole kind of video that's about 45 to 50 minutes long and gets incredibly detailed. But one of the first videos I was actually thinking about was covering maybe the Chechen War or the invasion in Iraq, so that way I could try and get a little bit more explanation as to how those worked and kind of give a bit of historical context to this situation. So I thank you so much for the support. And next question.
Next question is a comment from John Pearson. It says, thank you so much for the analysis, Enforcer. Slava Ukraine. I'm going to have to get better on my pronunciation with that. Chip in $10 to the channel.
Well, thank you very much, man. And Slava Ukraina. And thank you very much for the support. I thank you all very much. Next question.
Next up, Serge Ivanov, chipping in 10 Canadian, asks, could you tell more about Patriot missiles, which seems Ukraine is getting this week?
The Patriot missile defense system, as far as I know, is some kind of Iron Dome on a larger scale, I believe. Let's pull that up and take a look at that real quick and see what it actually is, because that's what I was told, but it could be something else. So I want to make sure that I'm giving you honest information. So, let's see. Let's take a look at this in detail. Primarily of its kind, it's manufactured by the U.S. defense contractor Raytheon, and it derives its name from the radar component of the weapon system. What's its purpose? Can we just get to that real quick? Let's see. Patriot's anti-ballistic missile. So it is a larger version of the Iron Dome. And so what I understood, and it appears to be mostly correct, is that it's a larger version of the Iron Dome that the United States uses, and in theory, it's supposed to be able to shoot down intercontinental ballistic missiles, from what I understand. Well, let me rephrase that. I believe it's not intercontinental ballistic missiles. I don't really believe there's a defense to that, but I believe it's supposed to be for intermediate range nuclear weapons, or really any kind of ballistic missile. So I believe that may answer your question. I'm sorry if I really can't get a very detailed answer to that, because I haven't really looked a lot at that system. But once again, thank you very much for the support. Next question.
All right, next up, Iamon Healy, chipping in $20, asks or says, "Love the stream, great work. What is the state of the Ukrainian air defense?"
The Ukrainian air defense at the moment is currently holding up a strong resistance. At the moment, it's kind of a pitched battle over all of Ukraine as to who will actually control the airspace, whether it'll be the Russians or the Ukrainians. And while the Ukrainians do have a small air force, their anti-air abilities, kind of like their air denial abilities, to say that in a better sense, are mostly man pads and surface-to-air capabilities, like their anti-air platforms. I really don't want to give like a specific term for it, because they have self-propelled anti-air that uses guns. We saw a truck yesterday with like a gish on the back of it. We've seen kind of like pantsirs from the Russians, and the Ukrainians, I believe, do have something similar, if not Tunguskas, which are almost identical to that. So at the moment, the Ukrainians are mostly relying on ground anti-air to shoot down the Russians and kind of contest the airspace, but the Air Force is still there, and they are still fighting for the airspace. So to answer the question in kind of like a nutshell, the airspace still is currently being contested by the Ukrainians, and the Ukrainian Air Force is now the fight yet. And once again, thank you very much for your support. Next question.
Okay, so Chris Kinder, chipping in $10, or states, "Thank you for the map. Could you zoom in on Kyiv to spread out the icons so we can see what's going on there better?"
Yes, we can. So most of the action, like all these little dots, are colored for different days of the week. So green is day 8. So anything that's green is day 8. And so I'll just keep it here for a second so that way you can see all of the dots. And also, if you'd like to take a better look at this for the first time tonight, we actually have a link to this map in the description below. So you can actually just go down there and click on that link, and you can pop up the map for yourself and take a look around it while we're doing the stream. But once again, thank you very much for the support, and I hope this has kind of given you a better idea of what's going on in Kyiv, although these dots aren't accurately placed down to the foot. They're just in the general area. But once again, thank you so much for the support. Next question.
So I know this may be cheating, but I'm going to combine two of these ones. Terry Morganson and Mark Allen both chipping in with $19.99 and $5 respectively, saying "Slava Ukraine" and "Long live Ukraine."
Thank you very much, everyone in Slava Ukraina. They deserve all the support in the world they could get. And right now, it looks like the U.S., at least in terms of economic sanctions, has heavily ramped up that support by blocking Russian imports of oil, which is a huge deal. And that may, if we even don't directly go to war and support Ukraine, that may actually be a tipping point for the Russians to start having open hostilities with the West. So hopefully that's not the case. Hopefully we can just keep on pressuring them until they have to settle with a peace agreement of some kind to get out of Ukraine and stop the absolute suffering and collapse that's happening in Ukraine. But thank you very much, both of you, once again, and Slava Ukraina. Next question.
All right. Wolfgang kicking in $5 to the stream, asks, "Are there any updates on the jets being donated from Poland?"
Okay, so that's a great question, actually, and it's been very complicated, so I didn't include it on the map today. Poland was supposed to donate all 23 of their MiG-29s to Ukraine, but then they did some weird kind of like political third-hand used car salesmanship, and they wanted to send the 23 MiG-29s to Ramstein Air Force Base in Germany, and then have the United States hand them over to the Ukrainians, as far as the story I've been told. And so the United States said, we actually had no kind of knowledge of this beforehand, and the Polish have kind of thrown this on us, so we are going to turn that down and say we are not going to do it, but the Polish are still perfectly fine to just fly them over the border and give them to the Ukrainians. But my problem is this, and this is just kind of looking at this as a common sense thing. While the United States is a much more powerful country, and the Polish are trying to give the aircraft to the United States to hand over to the Ukrainians, both of these countries are a member of NATO. And so the story didn't make sense to me, because why would it matter if Poland or the US handed them over? Because they're both NATO allies, and either one handing them over is pretty much direct support to Ukraine, according to what the Russians say, whether Poland did it or America. So I don't really know how that story works. Maybe there's more details that I haven't gotten that makes that story make more sense. But once again, I thank you very much for the support, and I hope that answers your question, because it's a very convoluted thing that's going on with that, and I really don't know what's going on with the aircraft myself. But it does look like Ukraine will eventually get 23 MiG-29s to further bolster the Air Force's numbers. And next question?
PK Nexus, chipping in $2 to the channel, asks, what military expertise informs your commentary?
Actually, surprisingly, there is no military expertise. Like, I'm not actually military trained anyway. I haven't gone to a military school, and I haven't priorly served, but my military experience just kind of comes from being a history major and focusing a lot on war and how it's been conducted over the years. Mostly, I've figured out and learned through reading and, history books, that logistics are the most important part of warfare. And so I put a lot of my emphasis on how wars are fought on logistics, because it all relies on supplies if you look through history. Because while Napoleon could march into Russia, the French army lived off of the land, and Napoleon was very famously known for saying an army marches on its stomach. And I believe he came up with that phrase on the march to Moscow, because everything was burned in between where he started in Berlin to Moscow by the Russians, and there was absolutely nothing for them to eat. And so while he had a massive army that overpowered the Russians both strategically and technologically, there was no way for him to win, because they simply did not have the food nor the supplies to keep on going. And that's when they started to march back to France, and most of the army died due to starvation and, pretty much, to sum it up, a lack of supplies, as just one example. But if you look throughout all of history, countries start losing wars when they start losing the logistics side of things. And so that's kind of where I get my military basis of knowledge off of, kind of, is just looking at history and like finding the trends in warfare that show that certain things lead to certain events. Next question?
Right, next up, Liberty Dude chipping in $50 to the channel, says, hoorah, in a loud Marine-ish voice, or maybe it's an army voice, for everyone fighting for liberty. Below those train tracks now, he says, Russia beat the Nazis because they were willing to scorch earth to hinder them.
That's true. They also did that to Napoleon as well. And another thing that's really interesting to me is that you said blow up the railheads. And what's actually good news is that was one of the first things the Ukrainians did in the opening days of the wars, is that they destroyed the railheads going into and out of the country almost in one fell swoop over the course of a few hours. So the great news is that the Russians, who rely entirely on railroads to get most of their supplies in bulk and quickly, most of those have already been destroyed. And I thank you so much for the donation. That's great, and we're going to be able to help out the channel with developing better content a lot more in the future. So I thank you very much for that. That's huge, and so I thank you. Next question.
Joseph Wecker, chipping in $20, asks, what is the status of Belarusian troops? Also, Putin told Russians that there were no conscripts being used in Ukraine, which appears clearly to be a lie. But why is it important for him to tell that lie? Lastly, is Russia vulnerable on other fronts now?
Okay, so I'm thinking I'm going to have you read that back to me in a couple of different pieces, but we're going to address the first part, which is, are Belarusians currently involved in Ukraine? And the answer is, as far as we know, they're not. Because we haven't seen any Belarusian troops on the front lines. We haven't actually had an official declaration of joint military activity between Belarus and Russia. So as far as we know, they're not. But that doesn't mean that they are not there. They may actually be in some kind of supporting roles behind the lines where no one can really identify whether they're Belarusian or Russian. They could be doing some kind of logistical support, trying to help the Russians with their dreadful logistical situation. So as far as we know, the Belarusians currently aren't in Ukraine, officially at least, but they may be behind the lines doing some kind of logistical support. And what was the next part of that question?
Next part of the question, why did Putin lie about conscripts being used?
He's probably lying about conscripts being used because he needs to try and portray the picture that Russia's military is actually pretty good. I mean, like, like over in Russia, the story's entirely different. They're saying that they're winning the war at an unprecedented speed. They didn't expect this kind of progress and ground to be made. And so what he's trying to do is, for the Russians, he's still trying to paint the story that no, we didn't send your boys who are on a 1 year military contract and probably got 3 weeks of training into Ukraine to get killed. No, 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 not at all. We actually sent the best trained soldiers, the ones with the 4 year and 3 year contracts, into Ukraine to fight this war because they have a lot of experience. And so I don't really believe that's true. I believe he's trying to appease the Russian public and thinking, okay, well, maybe my son, who has no training and he just went in there because he was required by law to serve a year, and he's probably not over there getting killed right now. It's probably the whole reason why he said that. And what was the next part?
The final portion of the question is Russia vulnerable on other fronts now?
As far as actually knowing that the actual number of the Russian ground forces is somewhere around 600 to 700,000 when you include the conscripts, and around 280,000 when you just talk about active duty personnel that are contract soldiers only. Going off of that, I would assume they're probably not, although a lot of their military is tied up in Ukraine. I don't believe they're facing any sort of situations around the rest of Russia. Because if we look at China, which China and Russia have always had conflicts over the Manchurian border, there hasn't been any news of that. And also on top of that, it appears that the Chinese are at least appeasing or trying to stay neutral with the Russians, so that way in the future they can try and make some kind of political alliance with them, or play the situation for now to weaken Russia's military on paper a little bit, so that way the Chinese will be almost the unquestionable power of the Asian like sphere of influence, and so they won't really have any direct competitors to their power or control, because the Russians will be severely weakened by the economic sanctions and also militarily now, so they'll be able to have Russia in a much more amicable position to listen to what they want. So as far as that goes, now that number of Russian troops, including conscripts, is around 600 to 700,000, I'd assume they're probably not in a very bad position around the rest of the country with the new fronts being opened. And so I think we're going to cut the... Oh, do we have any more people who have given donations?
You've got 10 more.
Oh my god. I think we're going to have to save those, because if I stay here and try and answer all of them, we won't ever get on to the rest of the news. I know that's what all of y'all are here for, it's the news. And so if we could save those and answer them in the next round of questions, we're going to get to those first thing. But once again, everyone who I'm not reading off right now, I have to thank y'all for the support. Y'all don't know how much this is going to help out the channel. And so y'all don't even know. Like, I don't even know how to really process that there's 10 more of y'all already. And by the time we get to the next round of questions, there will be a load more. So I thank y'all so much. I can't believe y'all are supporting this channel and helping me out. It's a great honor to think that y'all think so highly of the channel and this news. And that being said, I'm going to make sure to deliver some more news to y'all. So moving on to all the location unknown markers, we can see that there is a Boneyard T-72 in service today. Now, this is interesting. This is really weird. And I think all of y'all who are looking at the picture are probably thinking the same thing. The Russians, and I said this a while ago, the Russians just could not have the budget to support all the tanks they have on paper. And this tank right here, and the condition it's in, devoid of any additional equipment rather than the basic equipment needed to run the tank. The engine, the gun sights, commander sights, all that stuff. Nothing else is extra on it. There is no IR spotlight. There's no ERA armor. There's no smoke grenade launchers. There's none of that stuff on this tank. This thing is just bare bones. And that's telling me this. That's telling me that the Russians are actually starting to run out of tanks as well, apparently. And now they're starting to have to pull out tanks that were going to be used for spare parts, in other words, cannibalized. And now they're starting to use them on the front lines. And so this is telling me that the Russian situation is becoming very dire. And this is all my opinion, just looking at this one tank. And this tank is in terrible shape. It's in very bad shape. And I'm just kind of basing this opinion off of that. So it may not be entirely true. This may be a one-off instance of this one tank looking to be in terrible shape. But if this is the condition that the Russian forces are in across the entirety of Ukraine, this is going to start suggesting that the Russians have run out of actual operable tanks, and now they're starting to pull in stuff out of boneyards to try and use them to fight the war. And so this is, once again, this is kind of suggesting, at least in my opinion, that the Russians didn't have the budget to upkeep all of their tanks, and now they're having to start pulling on the tanks that they were retiring or cannibalizing. So anyways, moving on from that, we also have another picture of a Russian abandoned tank. I'll show you all that right now.
Так, після нашого бою ця підросня почала кидати танки і з'йобувати. Якось так.
And as you can see, these are actually pretty decent tanks. These are T-80Us.
Слава Миргороду, слава Україні.
T-80Us are pretty on up there in the Russian arsenal. They're close to being one of the most modern tanks they have, although it's not the most modern. But that's way up there. So you just saw about 3 of them in the same video that have been abandoned, and then they're now captured by the Ukrainians. So looking at that, we can start to see that, you know, we're seeing what we've been seeing for days now at this point, really. We're seeing that the Russians who have brought in the good equipment, because everyone's always saying, oh, wait until the Russians really bring in the good stuff and then it's done for them. They are bringing in the good stuff. We've seen T-90s destroyed, T-80 BVMs. Now we're seeing more T-80Us. We've seen Mi-28s flying over Kherson. We've seen Mi-35s get shot down. We've seen, you know, the best of the Russian Air Force get shot down. And so we're seeing the trend, and I can almost say this with certainty at this point, that due to the equipment that's being lost or abandoned in Ukraine by the Russian army, we do know that they are actually bringing out their best stuff to try and fight this situation right now. So moving on to another location unknown instance, we've seen on an ATGM camera footage. I'm not sure if this is inside of a vehicle or not. I don't have that kind of information, but we can see on this footage that they destroyed a Russian APC. And so I'll just show you all the video. It's pretty self-explanatory, and here we have it. This also appears the what they are looking at with the crosshairs right now appears to be some kind of T-72 maybe. Fortunately, I don't think there's audio on this. Actually, there is. My fault. It's my correction. And then they hit the T-72 as well and knocked both of them out at the same time, pretty much. And it was really interesting to me because it looks like the T-72, if we look at where it is, like the turret hasn't even moved or anything. It looks like it's pretty much not reacted to the APC, the BTR, blowing up right in front of it. So I don't know what that's really supposed to suggest. Maybe they were taking a break. The Russian crews were taking a break and they had gotten out of the vehicles. And so they were trying to get back into the tank to react to it, and then they got hit by the ATGM. But there's a whole bunch of gray area there, and so I really can't assume what was happening there, but we know that they destroyed a BTR and a T-72 from the looks of it in one go with 2 anti-tank shots. So that's actually a pretty good thing. And so moving on from that, we see that the Ukrainians have captured one of the Tiger Gaz armored cars. The tires coming off the rim down there.
Юта за рулем, блядь. Тигр полный быка, блядь, два шнура в машине, блядь. Давай сюда, Ют.
So pretty much, I mean, like we've seen this happen a lot though with the little Russian armored cars, the Gaz Tigers, is that they keep on getting captured a lot, and it's starting to suggest that the Russians are maybe using these in a very large amount to try and move troops into a city instead of using tanks. Because in Chechnya, when the 90s, they actually just rolled tanks into the city and they lost hundreds of them. At least that's what we know. The Russians claimed that they lost like 60 of them, but we know on the first day of fighting in Grozny alone, they lost 100. So we know that the numbers that the Russians are reporting aren't entirely true. But what we do know is that it appears that they're starting to use armored cars instead now, and it looks like they're not really having any progress with that either, but at least they cost less in the Russians' eyes, so losing them isn't as big of a problem as losing a main battle tank or dozens of them in a single day. So moving on from that, we can see Georgian volunteers have captured a BMP-2. Once again, this is a location unknown video, so I don't know where this happened, but we can see something really cool in this video right... Hang on. Right there. You see that? That is a Beretta M82 50 caliber rifle. So what's really cool about that is that that rifle can actually punch through the armor on a BMP-2, because the BMP-2s are actually pretty thin armored. It's like I believe about 20 millimeters of armor on all sides, pretty much, of the hull. And so this thing could actually punch through the BMP-2 and, pretty much take out the crew like they were in open air. So that's really interesting to me that they have one, and it almost makes this video in like a different context. It's almost like they're on a wild country safari on some sort of big game hunt, and they just took out this BMP-2 with an elephant gun. But that's kind of getting a little descriptive and colorful. But anyways. Also, another interesting note is that this group of Georgian volunteers is led by the former Georgian Minister of Defense, which was a really interesting fact to me. And so finally, moving on, we can see that the Ukrainians have gotten their shipment of Panzerfaust 3s from Europe, from multiple European countries, and so I'll show you all the video. Now, I don't really know how effective a Panzerfaust 3 is, but we do know that they got a decent amount of them, and I'm sure that Europe isn't going to be providing Ukraine with useless equipment, because we've already seen the United States provide them with very capable tank busters in the form of javelins and javelin missiles to further supply the javelin launchers that they have. And so I know that they're probably not equipping them with useless stuff, but I would like to know if the Panzerfaust 3 actually does compare to something like an RPG 27, I believe, is the correct modern Russian RPG that's used for anti-tank operations, or the Javelin, because knowing either of them would be very beneficial to know. So moving on down to Sumi, we can see that there was rubble after... Well, actually, I'll show you all the first video. There was an explosion, a massive explosion in Sumi. I believe it may have been caused by some kind of cruise missile, but I'm not entirely sure on that. We really don't know what caused the explosion, but we know the aftermath, there were 20 people dead. So I'll just show you all the video. And so the explosion was rather large, as you could see from the video. And so that being said, here's the damage that was caused by that explosion. I do have to mention once again that 20 civilians were killed. We're not really sure how many of them were civilians, but due to it being what appears to be a commercial or residential area, one can only assume that most of them were civilians, which is another completely unsolicited attack on the Ukrainian population. And due to that, I believe that the Ukrainians deserve to destroy at least more Russian armor or more Russian soldiers and keep this fight going. Because as we can see, the Russians have no regard for civilian lives whatsoever. And there was a video I was going to include today on this stream because it wasn't really graphic, but to me it was such a disturbing video, even though it wasn't graphic, that I couldn't, and so I'll describe it to you all the best I can. So an old couple was inside of a black car, and it was an old man and an old lady. They were, an old people couple. And so they were in the car and they were driving down the road, and all of a sudden a BMP-2 comes barreling at them from another street and shoots at their car through the trees, hits the front of the vehicle near the front windshield, and goes through, and it kills both of the old people inside the car. And they continue to fire inside the car. They fire 2 ATGMs at the car and then promptly left. And so it was a really disturbing video to me because there was no reason for that to happen. There was no provocation from the car. It didn't even appear like the car was trying to escape. They were driving at the speed limit, and the BMP just comes barreling around the corner and kills these 2 old people. And so I didn't include that on the stream, but I wanted to mention that because what the Russians are doing against the Ukrainian civilians is completely unwarranted. It's a war crime, and they should be held accountable for what they're doing. I mean, like, even, there's a lot of people who say we shouldn't really get involved because it could cause a nuclear war, and I understand that. Everyone understands that. If we get involved, it could be the end of the modern world and the modern age. But the thing is this, and when you look at what they're doing to Ukrainians, you just have to think, can you really sit by and let them do this stuff and let them get away with it? And to me, like at this point, I really can't see a direction where we keep on letting them get away with doing this sort of stuff. You know, it's well documented at this point what they're doing to civilians. And so me personally, you know, this is of course my opinion, and everyone has a different opinion on this matter because we're talking about the whole entire modern world at stake if Putin isn't bluffing. Maybe we should start getting more directly involved in Ukraine because what the Russians are doing is criminal. So finally, moving on to the two last points around Sumi, we can see some good news, and that's in a captured tank around Sumi. We've seen loads of these. This one's actually in running order, I do believe. And one thing I would like to point out, now this was something really cool that maybe I'm wrong on, but this little stripe here, this black and orange stripe with a red star with a white field in the middle of it, I believe that's a Victory Day mark, and so I believe this tank is used by one of the units that is involved in the Victory Day parade every year in Moscow. And if I'm true about that marking, because it appears to have no other identification rather than that one marking alone that's on both sides of the tank, this may be a captured T-72B3 that's used in the Victory Day parades, and if it is, I find that tank to be of higher value than a normal T-72B3 because this is a propaganda thing. You've captured one of the tanks that is being used at Victory Day, but really it has no other value than it just being used at Victory Day. It's just a normal T-72B3 beyond that. But anyways, I'll cut that video short because you get the picture that it's a captured T-72B3, and I think that's just really neat that that it looks like a Victory Day parade tank. But if y'all know different and y'all need to correct me, let me know. But I know that those markings are used on Victory Day T-72B3s. Let me pull that up just to make sure. Victory Day T-72B3. Let's see if we can just get an image of that. Yeah, there it is. It's right there. Look, it's the same marking that was on that tank in the same spot. Let's go back to that video again and look at that one more time. I want to make sure that what I'm saying is right here. So I'm going to skip forward a little bit. Yeah, look, it's the exact same size and everything. That has to be a Victory Day parade T-72B3 that's used by one of the units involved in that parade. It may even be the tank in that picture. Who knows? I mean, like, that would be a really big stretch, though, because there's tons of T-72s in the Victory Day parade. But if it is, wouldn't that be ironic? And wouldn't that be crazy? So, anyways, moving on from that, we also have some more unfortunate news. Nothing has been getting better in the area of Sumi for civilians. The Russians have supposedly constructed humanitarian evacuation corridors for the civilians to leave these cities if they would like. And they agreed to a ceasefire to allow the civilians to escape. But in this video, you can actually hear gunfire coming from the escape corridor. And I'm just going to let y'all listen because I find it rather infuriating that they're fighting right around the escape corridor.
Люди эвакуироваться собрались, там кто-то бой открыл. Ебать, он танк стоит, хуярит. Танк стоит, херачит. Пиздец. Заезжают танки в город.
It's just infuriating to me at this point. I mean, this stuff is outrageous, really. Think about it. There were civilians trying to escape from Sumi, and the Russians have pretty much nearly set up a turkey shoot ambush to funnel these civilians down and then get in a firefight with the Ukrainians and claim that they broke the ceasefire. This stuff is getting insane at this point. Right now, as far as we know, there's been about 2,000 Ukrainian civilians killed, and I'm sure that number has gone up drastically over the past few days. And I believe that at some point we have to say enough is enough, and even if doing the right thing ends up destroying us, we should be doing the right thing at some point eventually. And I know that's a very extreme stance, but when you're me and you're watching all this stuff every day and you're watching everything that comes out and a lot of stuff that can't go on the stream and you see all the atrocities that the Russians are committing against the Ukrainians on an hourly basis nearly, just the civilians. It's unbelievable. It's insane. And for that, I believe that I believe that actually gives the Ukrainians that much more anger towards the Russians to keep on fighting them because the amount of civilian casualties I've seen on video is unbelievable. I can't even really go into all the individual instances I've seen, but they're terrible. And I hope that none of y'all have to see them because they're very bad and they're very awful and they'll leave you in a very bad mindset afterwards. And so finally, we'll move into Kharkiv, and then we'll start answering questions before we get to the southern front. I'll try and answer as many as possible because I know that we have a lot of people who are supporting the channel, and I'd like y'all to all know that I am really thankful. I am, but I didn't believe that there would be so many of y'all. So moving on, we'll cover these two topics in Kharkiv. We've seen that there's been some more extensive damage in Kharkiv. I'll show you all the pictures. One of these you've actually seen the day before, but we can see that one of the commie blocks has been hit. It looks like it's taken a decent amount of damage across the entirety of it, but it's gotten a significant amount of damage up here. It looks like a couple of the apartments have collapsed in on each other. So hopefully no one was inside of those apartments, but you never know. And with Russians, knowing their track record at this point, there probably were people in there, although they didn't really have any control over if the missile hit an uninhabited apartment room or not, but still, civilians were probably killed. We can see another damaged building here. This one actually looks like it has received some gunfire at some point because we can see pop marks from the bullet holes that have hit the side of the building here. So maybe there was a battle that was fought in this part of the city in the earlier days of the war, and now it's being shelled and we're starting to see damage from that. But nonetheless, the damage is very extensive. And then finally, we go on to this picture that everyone's been using a lot, and everyone's saying that Kharkiv is starting to look a lot like Stalingrad, and they could not be any truer. If you pull up pictures of Stalingrad in World War II, it looks almost just like this. All the windows blown out, the buildings have stuff strewn from the inside of them out, because explosions, for some reason, even if they happen outside, they suck. I guess it's because of how the oxygen flows, but they actually suck things like paper and stuff from the inside of buildings if the windows are blown out. I mean, I don't know why that happens, but apparently that's how it works. But anyways, it looks a lot like Stalingrad. And I hate that this is happening, but the strong Ukrainian defenders inside of Kharkiv have been holding the city, for nearly 2 weeks because Kharkiv has been directly under attack since almost day one of this war. And so I have to give the defenders of Kharkiv a huge pat on the back for holding for this long. No one even expected Ukraine to hold for more than a day or a day and a half, and yet here we are 13 days in. Now it's 14 days over there in Ukraine right now, and they are still holding, and that's huge. That's a massive deal because the West never even expected it out of them, and here they are holding their ground. And I have to say, huge kudos to all the Ukrainians out there who are watching the stream and they are currently fighting in this war. I got to give it to y'all. Y'all just keep on fighting. Nothing will stop y'all, and I don't think in the future there will be anything that will stop y'all. And if y'all keep on fighting for just a few weeks longer, and I know that sounds like a long amount of time, but believe me, I believe that although this is my opinion, there will be a peace agreement within the next few weeks. That's just my opinion though, so take that with a grain of salt and don't quote me on it. But I feel like the Russians cannot sustain this kind of warfare and these kinds of harsh economic sanctions for much longer. So anyways, now that we've covered that, we're going to move on to the outskirts of the city, and we've seen that there's been some Russian mortar activity near Kharkiv, and I'll just show you all that real quick.
Росгвардии, вот, сейчас будут наносить минометный огонь по окраинам Харькова, по укреплениям националистов сами Северной Осетии, с Моздока, Росгвардия. Воюем за наших дедов, за то, чтобы националисты, которые фашисты, не распространялись в нашем государстве больше. Вот, за нашу землю, за русских. Вот. Всем привет, всем здоровым, у духа, всем.
Hopefully they'll be wiped out before the next 24 hours. That's all I got to say. But as you can see, Russian mortars, apparently they look like heavy mortars, maybe larger than 120 millimeters, most likely. I don't know the exact size, though. I'm just assuming that it's in the ballpark of 120 millimeters or a higher caliber. But it looks like, hopefully, they'll be wiped out soon. Hopefully they cannot inflict a lot of damage on the city or the defenders, and I wish the Ukrainian defenders the best of luck of wiping out those cocky Russians and that mortar group right there. So now before we move on to the southern front, which has had some developments today, and I may recap on others if we have questions about them, I'm now going to take some more questions. And what do we have, Drew?
All right. So first up from Naria, chipping in $100 to the channel, says Slava Ukraine, and has a multiple part question. Question part one: if the logistical situation is this dire, which the numbers suggest, how long do you think it will take until catastrophic collapse?
First off, thank you for the support. I'm really blown away by that, and so the first thing the first thing I believe is that the Ukrainian logistical not the Ukrainian, I'm sorry, the donations completely throw me off kilter. I can't believe that. Thank you, but the Russian logistical situation is incredibly poor. As you've seen when I covered my last little essay on it, and I did the math figuring out how much ammo weighed, and I didn't even really consider how much room ammo took up inside the truck. Can they even carry 5.5 tons of ammo? Or would it be less because of the amount of space it's taking up in the truck? I didn't actually calculate that, so the numbers are off a little bit, but we got a general idea from that even at the best case scenario, the Russians are short around maybe 1,500 trucks, and at the worst case scenario, which is what I calculated, they're short by like 3,500 trucks. And so based off of that logistical situation and doing the math of how many BTGs there are, they can only supply at best 62% of the BTGs, and at worst, due to inefficiency, around 50% of them. And so only half of the Russian BTGs in Ukraine can operate. And I believe that's why we're seeing a lot of static areas on the front where not a lot is happening and very few units are moving from the Russians, is because their logistics are so poorly off. And so going off of that, if I had to assume how long it'll be until the Russians give up this war, just from the logistical side alone, like if they were looking at the logistics only and said we have to give up this war based off of this, I believe that's going to happen in maybe 2 weeks. And that's why I was saying when I was going over Kharkiv, if the defenders of Kharkiv and all of Ukraine really could just hold for 2 more weeks, I'm sure the war will be over by then. Because, you know, we can say, oh, the Russians can fix the situation by sending in more troops, but the thing is that they can't even feed and supply the troops that are already in Ukraine. So adding more soldiers to that is just going to make that problem even worse and start bogging down the problems and responsibilities of supplying them even further. So I believe the best answer to that question would be about 2 weeks. And I thank you so much for the support to the channel. That's huge. And I can't believe that you did that, and I just got to thank you so much. So I really can't even put into words how thankful I am for that. But thank you incredibly much. And so with that, I'll try and remember how much of a fan you are of this channel, and I thank you so much. And we're going to move on to the next question.
So second part of the same question.
Yes, I forgot.
How long will this take to register in the Kremlin, and what do you think happens next?
I believe that this is already registering in the Kremlin, and on top of that, we can't only look at the logistical situation alone. We also have to look at the Russian command situation as well, because we know that there's been about 3 major generals or generals of that grade that have been killed so far in this war, and so they have to have replacements for these generals immediately. They have to have someone moved up into that position and then go out there and assess the situation. But the problem is that these major generals that have been killed have been involved in the briefings and the planning of this invasion for months, and the replacements, while being well informed because they're probably currently involved in the fighting, they haven't been briefed as well as their superiors. They may have not been present during a lot of the information that was given to them to know the overall situation and what they were expecting. So going off of that, we have to assume that the generals who are taking over their places are not going to be doing as well a job as their predecessors, and their predecessors were not doing a good job. And so that being said, that paired with the logistical situation, I believe this situation is already starting to register with the Kremlin, because I mean, the situation is really bad. I mean, they keep on trying to lie to the public over there in Russia that it's actually going okay. But when you have 3 major generals killed, and the Ukrainians are claiming that they've killed 12,000 Russian troops, you know everything's going really bad. It has to be going bad at this point. And so, that being said, I believe it's registering right now. And so do we have any more parts to that question?
So that completes that question. There is another $100 donation to the channel from Esprecial. Up next, I hope I'm saying that correctly. Says, very impressed with the streams. If you need a military advisor, I'm always willing to answer your questions in the future. His question is, or her question is, what do you think Russia's stance on nuclear weapons use is at this point, in your opinion?
Okay, so that's a really good question, and it's a question that I have a tricky time answering as well. So I'm gonna give like and thank you very much for the donation again. I can't believe that I've gotten 2 donations of that size. So thank you very much.
That's the third one.
Really?
Yes.
Oh my God. Um. Well, God. Well. Thank you very much, everyone. I'm like that's unbelievable. I thank you all once again. I'm very grateful to everyone who's donating to this channel. You don't even know how much this is going to help out the budgeting and how this channel is going to start making new videos in the future and higher quality stuff. It's unbelievable. Y'all are going to help this channel get better. But anyways, moving on from that, we're going to talk about the nuclear situation. I'm going to try and give as much detail as possible as to what I'm thinking about this. And before I say all of this, none of this is hardcore. This is entirely my opinion and what I think the situation is. So that being said, take this with a grain of salt because this is only my opinion, and it may be different in real life. But going off of that, here we go. So the Russians in the first few days of the war moved nuclear forces into Belarus and put the nuclear deterrent forces, which is their nuclear arsenal, on high alert. And so going off of that, what we can assume is that the Russians are playing hardball with the nukes, obviously, because that's what all of that leads to. So going off of that, we know that they're threatening the West entirely with nuclear arms. And what that tells me is that the Russians politically think that the West views their army as incompetent on an actual higher up level. And so they can't really rely on the military arms alone to sway the West into not getting involved. They have to rely on the nuclear arsenal to stop the West from getting directly involved in the Ukraine conflict and providing advisors on the ground and a whole bunch of other supplies and support that the U.S. could easily funnel into Ukraine really quickly, and then have the Ukrainians at an upper hand advantage to the Russians in terms of their technology and their equipment and their supply. So with that being said, the Russians are taking a very hard stance. But here's the thing that I'm thinking. First off, the Russians have lost a decent amount of conflicts, and the most important one that I can point out, because some people say, well, they didn't have nukes at the time of the Winter War, because that's one of my examples of Russia losing a war to a smaller country and not taking some kind of extreme, of like just trying to like slaughter everyone in the country to just save face. A lot of people say that the Russians didn't have nuclear weapons at that time, and that's entirely true. So I guess you can kind of devalidify that one as being a good example. But in Afghanistan over here, they did have nuclear weapons, and they got embarrassed by a bunch of freedom fighters at the time. They were freedom fighters. Later on to the U.S., they become terrorists, but they got embarrassed by a bunch of freedom fighters that had been given stingers by the U.S. And so we saw them level villages in Afghanistan. They would just kill thousands of people by leveling the villages if they got any resistance. But the thing is that we didn't really see them nuke the country, of course, because, we don't have that documented historically, and so they didn't. And a lot of y'all were probably alive and at that time, and y'all know they didn't nuke the country. They just left it. And so going off of that, while Gorbachev was a much more soft leader than Putin, at least as far as we know on paper and historically, I don't think that the Russians would actually nuke Ukraine, because I can't really see a level of justification necessary for them to even justify that to the people who believe in what Russia is doing in Russia. Because the Ukrainians are a non-nuclear country. They gave up their nukes in 1994 under a treaty, and the Russians, the British, and the Americans all agreed that since they gave up their nukes, they would all jointly protect their sovereignty. And so we can see that the Russians have blatantly violated that, because they're currently invading the country right now. And the US and Britain haven't actually... They're trying to uphold the agreement to a point, but not really to the level that the text required in the treaty, because the text required that they actually get involved with force of arms in defending Ukraine's sovereignty. But as we can see, that's not happened. We're supporting them with supplies, but we're not actually supporting them with soldiers in this war. So that being said, I think really due to Russia lacking any kind of justification to this entire thing. I don't think that the Russians really have a leg to stand on to use nukes on Ukraine, but that is entirely my opinion because we've seen that Russia's been acting unpredictable, and this is the flip side of the coin that is kind of like the devil's advocate to my opinion, and surprisingly I'm giving the devil's advocate to my own opinion, but Putin has been acting incredibly unpredictable, and a lot of people are saying, and I believe it may be true, that he has some kind of terminal disease and it's killing him. And I mean, like, that's pretty believable. If you look at the guy lately, he looks like death warmed over, kind of. He's bloated, his skin's very pale. He looks like he's getting close to death, maybe, but that's all like a hypothesis and an assumption. We don't really have any proof to back that up. But he's been acting unpredictable. And so while I say that there is no justification for him to use nukes on Ukraine, and he couldn't even justify it to his own people, there might be a time when he does use nukes because he's acting unpredictable. And so to answer the question, my personal opinion is I don't think nukes will be used on Ukraine, but due to Putin being unpredictable, they may be used. So hopefully I answered that question pretty well. And once again, thank you for the support again. And so with that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
Okay, so Joseph Wecker, with his second question of the day, asks or states, the longer NATO can hold out, the more likely the Russian people will turn against Putin and possibly disobey orders to use tactical nukes. There's no doubt they'll get involved, but they have to wait as long as possible.
That's true. That's pretty true. Because I can see this happening for about 2 more weeks. The sanctions could last forever. I believe that the sanctions may last indefinitely, but Russia's ability to continue this war may only last a few more weeks. Because if you've been a fan of the stream, you've been watching it for days, you know that I believe that the Russian logistical situation has fallen apart completely, and we have support to back that up. We've seen them trucking in civilian vehicles on trains to back up, maybe even just replace the attrition of their logistical vehicles that are currently in Ukraine. And so we know that they're running out of vehicles, or they have a lack of them, or otherwise they wouldn't be requisitioning civilian vehicles to fill that gap. And so just based off of the supplies alone, because they can have all the tanks, the soldiers, the guns and stuff they want in the world, but if you don't have the food to feed them and the ammo to keep the guns running, then it's just pointless. And so I believe they can only last about maybe 2 more weeks, maybe a week and a half. But we'll have to see. I might be wrong, and this might go on for months, and somehow the Russians manage to cobble together some kind of solution to their logistical issues. But we just have to wait and see. So is there any other parts of that question, or are we moving on to the next one?
That concludes that question. Short comment from Thaddeus Crane just says, great job breaking everything down. The hours to put this thing together is incredible. You're going to make a great defense attorney.
I'm glad that everyone's getting involved in my my career in law. But I mean, like, I'm very glad to lay out as much information as possible. I know I go a lot, and that bothers a lot of people, and I'm sorry about that. I'm trying to fix that right now. I've been exhausted, but I actually drank coffee today, which I never do, and so it's actually kept me running a lot better, and I think I might start doing that more. But thank you very much, and hopefully I will be a good defense attorney. Hopefully I'll do as good being a defense attorney as most of y'all believe I'm doing, reporting this news. And so I thank you all very much for the support once again. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
So Igor C, chipping in $10 to the channel, states that the Russian soldiers you showed in that video earlier with the captured mortars, believes that they are already dead. I don't know what the evidence or anything else is, but that is the comment.
Well, if you have anything to back that up, make sure to join the Discord and show us some links so that way I can take a look at that, because if so, I'm going to make sure to definitely include that in tomorrow's news and put a little dot beside this one showing that that unit has been destroyed. But I would love to see a link to that so that way I can make sure that that will be included in tomorrow's news if that Russian mortar team has been destroyed. And so once again, I also thank you for the support too, because any bit of support counts, and I'm grateful to all of y'all and very honored that a lot of y'all are watching right now and donating to the channel, because the support means a lot to us. So next question.
Next up, Sire, I'm not sure, SYR, Gwen, chipping in $10 says, is the Western media providing the Russians with intelligence by publishing the amount and type of aid and volunteers sent?
Not really, because while really the numbers are very public, like you can pull up generally like the size of the Ukrainian army before the war, the pre-war numbers on Wikipedia, and usually those kinds of numbers are really easy to find out. Now, the thing though that would really be helping them is if they told us, if like Western media told us where they were going exactly. Like if they said 16,000 of them have joined, they've divided these up into battalions of 1,000 men, although that's a really big battalion, and they're moving one of them to go assault Pripyat. They're moving another one to try and hold this defensive line at Perluki from this breakthrough convoy. If they start doing that now, they would be helping out the Russians entirely, and there would have to, and I believe really that there should be some sort of disciplinary action taken against news companies that would do that sort of thing. Like I've seen some stuff today, and it wasn't included in stream, where they took pictures of Ukrainian forces around landmark buildings, which gives away their positions entirely, exactly where those troops were. And while the pictures may be 2 hours old, what if they're still there? It's giving the Russians information that they should not be getting, and that those pictures should be more closely guarded and made sure that they're not uploaded where the whole entire world can see them. So if they were doing that, I can entirely agree that they're helping out the Russians. But really, to be honest, the news coverage that I've seen, and I guess is in terms of Western news, you're probably talking about CNN, Fox, MSNBC. They usually do a very lackluster job at reporting what's going on. Like, I don't believe they give enough frontline information. Like, for example, up here, they're showing that there's like this big clubfoot shaped like area that the Russians control from Perluki to Njin, I believe is the correct pronunciation of that, and it shows that they're moving to Kyiv. But the thing is that all the information I've gotten from that area, which is just right here, and also from last week, shows that there's nothing more than maybe a breakthrough convoy or 2 or 3 that are driving down these roads and have passed the Ukrainians, but there's no like real Russian force behind them. I might be wrong saying that. Maybe they've gotten some more information that I haven't gotten, because I do all my reporting based off of video evidence, because that can be backed up, because you can not really fabricate a video with multi-million-dollar tanks in them with Ukrainian or Russian markings. But as far as I know, they're not really, they're actually reporting to the detriment of Ukrainians, because they're making the situation look a lot more hopeless than I know it is. And so to that degree, I don't really think they're helping out much at all. If anything, they're really just hurting the Ukrainian spirit by misrepresenting information that I don't really think they have a basis for. But then again, I don't know if they do have a basis for it or not. So thank you once again for the support, and we're going to move on to the next question.
Next question. Cooley Phoenix Box, chipping in $10, says, thank you for the live streams. I'm donating because of the quality of the work, and thus wanted to chip in. Has the U.S. sent any tanks or equipment over? Just curious.
Thank you once again for the support. I thank everyone for their support as much as possible. And if I had the time, I would just be doubting on, well, not doubting. I'd be, what's the term? I forgot the term.
Doting.
Doting, yes. I'm sorry. It just slipped my mind for a second. But I would be doting all over each and every one of y'all for helping out my channel, because I'm very honored that y'all think so highly of the content. And it's great that y'all do. But the U.S. hasn't actually sent out, like, if you're talking about equipment as in like tanks and actual larger equipment, they have not. But they have been sending over javelins and a whole bunch of smaller equipment. So in that regard, if you're asking about equipment of a larger size, as far as I know, no. But in terms of equipment of smaller size, things that can be carried around by infantry, yes, and to a huge deal. And actually, the U.S., in terms of support, they've really been given a lot more monetary support that I know of than sort of like military support, like support with lethal arms and stuff like that, because I believe they've already approved in Congress a $5.2 billion relief package to the Ukrainians, and I believe it was just straight up cash that would be transferred to the Ukrainians for them to be able to purchase weapons at their discretion. I believe that's what that bill was approved and what it was about, but I may not be entirely true on that. That may have been $5.2 billion in lethal aid, and if so, we're going to be seeing all kinds of weapons that come out of the middle of nowhere in American arsenals and is sent over there, and that stuff is going to be put to great effect, and the Ukrainians are never going to run out of that in the near future, hopefully. So anyways, that being said, I thank you very much for the support again, and I'm glad that you enjoy the streams. I'm glad that I have a lot of people who like the content, and we're going to move on to the next question.
Next question coming in from Mark, and I really don't want to butcher your last name, so I'm not going to attempt it. Chipping in $10, 10 Canadian, says the tanks and Bodenevka, apologies for the mispronunciation, with the letter O on them, is uploaded in your Discord server. Doing an awesome job, Enforcer.
Thank you very much, and I'm glad that you have that in the Discord server. So I'm going to make sure to try and take a look at that as soon as possible. I am going to be meeting with someone. Well, actually, I'm going to be having a after action report with all the mods after the stream is over. Drew has introduced me to that terminology. I liked it, so I'm going to keep that around. And also, I have to meet up with another one of our Discord members to talk with him about something that we're looking for doing for the channel in the future. And so I thank you very much for the support, and I'm going to make sure to check out that as soon as possible. So thank you very much once again, and we're going to move on to the next question.
So I did take a look at the video that was posted, and it looks like one that you may be going to cover today already, possibly, but still worth looking at later. Next question coming in from James Lynn, chipping in $10, retired U.S. logistics officer here. From the info that I've seen, they came in with only 3 days of supply. The constant attacks on the supply lines have hindered Russian resupply. Ukraine is doing it right.
They sure are, and I'm glad that we have. Was he saying that he was currently serving or a veteran?
Former or retired U.S. Army logistics officer.
So he
sounds like he put in the full 20.
Yeah, I mean, like that guy has a lot of experience. And thank you so much for the support, and I'm very glad that because every once in a while, to be honest, there are people who like just vehemently attack this channel. Like they post comment after comment in the comments section after this thing turns into a video on my channel, and they're telling me that I have no idea what I'm talking about and stuff like that. And I don't really take that much, you know. I mean, like I'd look at it, I'm like, you know, it is what it is. But I'm very glad that I have a lot of people from former military backgrounds who think that the quality of my content's good, because it tells me that I'm actually going in a good direction. So I thank you very much for the support, and I thank you that you're watching the channel, because it does tell me that I've at least got something to what I'm saying, and it has at least some founding in true military knowledge. So I once again thank you for the support, and we're going to move on to the next question.
Next question comes from George, New York's premier contractor, chipping in $200 to the channel. Incredible.
God.
States, I am an American of Georgian descent, husband of a Ukrainian woman. I am devastated. I see this tyranny third time in my life. Drove on those roads and towns just this summer. Thank you, my friend, for all you do and for contributing in the history of the Ukrainian people. Slava Ukraine.
Slava Ukraina. And oh my gosh, man. Like, you must have taken out a mortgage on the house for that. And I mean, I'm very glad you supported the channel. That's huge, and I'm very thankful for the support. And I actually had friends. Speaking of friends and people who have been in Ukraine, I actually had a friend. I won't say his name, but he was in the Air Force, and he was actually over there in 2013 as something of an advisor to the Ukrainian Air Force before even the Donetsk and Luhansk and the Crimea issues. I guess they call that in the war in the Donbass these days, but he was over there before that, and he had nothing but good things to say about the Ukrainians. And he's a reenactor, so we, hang out, and I've listened to his stories a little bit before. And he always talked about how the ice cream cones were so small in Ukraine compared to an American ice cream cone. And he always talked about how nice the Ukrainians were, and they were just overflowing with kindness. And, I also have a friend from Ukraine. I won't say his name. I'm not going to say any of their names, because I would like them to keep their identity secret, and if they'd like to be known, then I'll maybe mention their names later. But I actually have a friend over there, and he was near Kyiv when the war started, and luckily he got out. But he was a very nice kid when he was over here. Him and me went to high school together. He was like on a foreign exchange student program, and he was very cool, and it was very neat to learn about different cultural aspects of Ukraine. Like, he found living in a house to be weird. He actually thought that most people only needed like a small apartment, even for like a whole family. And that was really cool to like hear about how their culture is a little bit different in ways like that from America, and also hear about how similar we are. And he was a very cool guy, and he's still over there right now, and I've tried to check on him here and there, but I don't know if he's watching right now. It's very early in the morning. I've tried to get him on, but it hasn't really worked out, at least when I started the stream, and I'm going to see about getting him on later. But I feel like he's very busy with being, in a war and stuff. Even if he's away from the front, I think he's involved in helping them out. So I like helping out the war effort. But once again, I thank you so much for your support. It's a big thing to me, and hopefully this all sorts itself out. I know actually that there is a large Ukrainian speaking group up there in New York City, kind of like the New York City area. And if you're from that group, um, I hope I wish y'all all the best, because y'all are like, I believe they call it Little Kyiv or something up there. And so I wish y'all all the best, and thank you very much for the donation. I mean, like, the graciousness of doing that is unbelievable, and I thank you so much. And I hope you join the Discord, and I hope you stay tuned to the news. I know you will, because apparently you appreciate it a huge deal, and I just can't thank you enough for the support and the donation. And so thank you very much. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
Okay, and just as far as time management, you're sitting on a backlog of 14 contributions that have questions attached to them, as well as a bulk of 5 that are just pure donations. And I think we should, of course, still go over those names. But the next one coming in from Aria AGA, chipping in $19, it says, "Thank you for your knowledge and perspective."
Well, thank you very much. I'm glad that you support the channel. And once again, like I'm saying to everyone, and I mean, like, I don't want to sound like I'm just rehashing the same wordage over and over, because I really don't know how to say thanks, because I didn't really expect this tonight. Really, I just expected that maybe a couple of people would chip in $5 and that would be it. But like, this is insane, and I can't thank y'all enough. Like, thank you so much. This is really going to help out the channel, and I'm going to try and keep this content coming for y'all as much as possible. But once again, I thank you very much for your support, and you don't know how much it means to me. And so we're going to move on to the next question.
We're going to read off some bulk names that have chipped in. We got John Dilly, 1997, chipping in $19. We got Morphe chipping in $9.99. We got Takata Store chipping in $5 Canadian. We got Stuart TX chipping in $5. We got James Loeb chipping in $2, and we got Look in the Mirror chipping in $1.49.
And I think y'all
And those,
all...
those are the ones that did not have questions attached to them.
And I got to thank y'all all so much for the support. I mean, like, every donation is a huge deal to me, because people are going out of their way. Now, when I started this channel, people went out of their way to devote their time to watching my streams, and I found that to be a high honor, and I still do. Even now, I find it a high honor that a lot of people are watching these streams and getting information and news from them. But it's even a higher honor, really, to just get donations for reporting this news, because I'm not really asking for any donations. I mean, like, if y'all wanted to not give any donations at all, I would still be happily doing this news and reporting this, because I feel like it does a service to many people, and hopefully there's good information in this. And I guess from all the donations I'm getting in support, a lot of people must be agreeing. And so I thank y'all all. I thank each and every one of y'all for your support as well, because any support y'all give is it means a million things to me and the future of this channel. And so I thank y'all all very much. And so we're going to move on to the next question. I believe that'll be the last one for now. We'll cover the Southern Front information, and then we'll revisit the questions.
All right. So Fly New York also chipped in £5 with no question attached. I missed that one, and my apologies. The next one that has a question attached to it, coming in from GTN, chipping in $10, says, "How does the transfer of Poland's MiG-29s to the U.S. and then being sent into Ukraine change the Russian calculus?"
I don't believe it does, and I believe it would have made it actually a much greater, at least as far as how the United States is reacting to this. It appears that it would have made it even a greater level of escalation of the conflict in between, well, at least the cold conflict going on in between NATO and Russia right now, and the Russian-backed countries, is that if Poland had handed over those to the United States, and then the United States had sent them in, instead of Poland doing it, it would have been the United States. And so it would have carried a lot more weight to it that the Americans were sending in the aircraft than the Polish. And so that's why I don't understand why the Polish said that. It's like, is that trying to, like, make, like, a big publicity stunt that Poland's trying to help, but then they do something where no one could help them? I don't really know. But on top of that, as far as I know, one NATO member doing that would be the same. Like, if Poland did that, it'd be the same as the U.S. doing it, because they're both NATO members. And so, you know, one country, one NATO member doing that would be the same as another one, regardless of how powerful the country is. And so I don't really understand what the kind of posturing behind that was. And so I hopefully answered that question as best as I could. And for now, we're going to have to hold the questions, because I don't want to, you know, sit here and stop the news from coming all night long. I do, once again, thank y'all all so much for the questions. And so we're going to move on to some news around Mariupol and this town called, let me make sure I get that right, let me move that one. Volnovaka. Today we've seen that there were DPR forces, more of them. We've seen them around a few days ago, but we've seen more videos of the DPR forces in Volnovaka. So I'm just going to let y'all see that real quick.
Вот она сильная украинская армия, которая кричала, что они зайдут за 3 дня, блядь. Вот, текают, бросают позиции, пацаны. Да.
Парни, как дела? Как там? Настроение боевое.
Нормально, отлично.
Маме, папе, жене и ребенку привет большой. Они сейчас сидят в Донецке под обстрелами.
You know, I just got to make a mention of this. This guy is wearing ratnik camouflage and some kind of camouflage pattern that looks like puke. I mean, like, I'm not trying to make fun of it or anything and make any sort of comedy routine out of, like, stating what his uniform looks like. But they're all wearing, like, mismatched equipment. If we go back to this little picture here of all of them passing by. Like, this is like a ragtag group. This guy's even wearing, like, a Soviet Army parade belt over his body armor. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. This is just, like, the weirdest stuff. These people are like a ragtag army of, like, I don't even know. I mean, like, I don't even really know what they would look like, but these people just look like some thugs with some camo and some guns, really. You know, but then again, the DPR forces are kind of expected to look like that because they're dirt poor provinces on the on the frontier of Ukraine. And so, you know, the chances of them even having a budget for their military is incredibly low, and I'm sure that anything they have that actually works was probably provided to them by the Russians in the past few years. And so moving on from that, we're going to talk about Mariupol today. The Ukrainian president in his address, which I cut out for today because the addresses are long, and if y'all want to see them every day and y'all want to see the address that Zelensky, because he is a very good man, he's a great politician and a good speaker. If y'all want to see his speeches, make sure to let the mods know in the comments, and when we do our little after action report here in a bit, I'll know that and I'll make sure to include his addresses every day from here on. But he said that a child today died of dehydration in Mariupol, and when you think about that, the situation must be getting pretty severe. And so anyways, moving on from that, we can see that a Ukrainian tank, as far as the location on this video says, was destroying a Russian convoy in Mariupol. And so I'll show you all the video.
Так, от сьогодні. Були ще їхали трошки хлопці, ми з Васі пообідали їхніми продуктами, а тепер вони отам, не виходять. Я їх просив.
Pretty good stuff to see the Ukrainians at work busting up some Russians here and there. I don't really know exactly where this was. It says it's in Mariupol, but I haven't actually seen any videos come out that makes Mariupol look like this. This kind of looks like a different area, but as far as the video went, it said it was in Mariupol, and I don't really have any information to go against that. So I put it in Mariupol, but it may be in a different location. I just want that to be known, just in case if it is. So anyways, moving on, we can see that there's been more destroyed Russian equipment near Mariupol today. It appears that they have captured... Oh, this is apparent. I'm sorry, I can't show that then, because if it's not safe for work, that could get this stream shut down and the YouTube account deleted. So I can't show that, unfortunately. But when I watched it earlier, it apparently was not in SFW. But anyways, it just showed that they had captured some BMP3s in the video, and apparently there was something that was in it that I didn't catch earlier and didn't see. So unfortunately I can't show you that video, but it was nothing more than some captured BMP3s as far as what I saw. So you know, if y'all want to see this, y'all can click on the description below. There's a link down there for this map, and you can click on it and you can take a look at it for yourself. So moving on from that, we're going to move on down from Mariupol, and we're going to move towards the area of Kherson. And from what we've seen from satellite footage, we've seen that there was a large helicopter base somewhere in the Kherson region that the Russians were using. As you can see in this picture right here, it's kind of like a thermal map. It appears, according to the description, that there were 49 helicopters at this little helicopter base. And according to what the Ukrainians said, they have destroyed all of them. They've already targeted the space, and they say that they've destroyed all of the helicopters on the ground. And so if we were to go with that assumption, that means the Ukrainians just on day 13 destroyed 49 helicopters. Now, they weren't airborne, they were on the ground, but that's still a huge number of helicopters that the Russians lose in a single sitting and a single area. Now, I would like to see if anyone could confirm that on the ground and maybe get some pictures to show the absolute carnage of the Russian helicopters that were destroyed in that area. But we'll have to see if that comes out in the coming days. And nonetheless, I'll mostly believe that the Ukrainians destroyed that, because it wouldn't make sense in this case, even if they were trying to come up with some sort of propaganda spin on this for them to lie about it, because it could be easily disproven. So moving on from that, we're going to now move on to the area of Kherson, where we've seen a few developments today. And the first one we've seen is that a Russian BMD-2 was near the Kherson area. Destroyed, of course. But I'll show this to y'all real quick. Video is self-explanatory. This thing was blown to pieces. As you can see, it's only a lone BMD-2. I don't know why it was on its own or it wasn't in a convoy, but that thing had been destroyed in its entirety, to the point that apparently the metal weakened and the turret actually fell down into the ground, because the floor of the tank also apparently melted or warped as well, which is pretty wild. I don't really know what hit it, but we do know that there was probably an ammo cook-off that led to those kinds of temperatures that would lead to the hull to melt like that. So that being said, the damage on that BMD was incredibly severe. And I don't really know if that happened days ago, because as far as we know, the Ukrainians are not currently fighting to retake Kherson. I believe they're fighting somewhere else up here in this area. But as far as I know, they're not actually in Kherson anymore. But if I get any information to contradict that, I'll make sure to update that in the next stream. We've also seen that a Russian jet was shot down near Kherson today. As we can see the pilot's parachute in the air as he bailed out. And I believe that may be a fell parachute right there. And there was two pilots. Maybe it was an Su-34 that had been shot down, or some kind of like tandem cockpit airplane that had been shot down. But if what I'm saying is correct, then that is another pilot, and his chute has failed, and he's not going to be having a good day today, based off of that. So the Russians will be deprived of another pilot if they're able to get them back, if they're over friendly, Russian-friendly territory, and the Russians are able to just retrieve them. It looks like they won't probably be getting one of them back if we're seeing two pilots in that video. So, good news for the Ukrainians, bad news for the Russians. Moving on from that, we've seen what appears to be a breakthrough convoy. It was an incredibly small convoy moving through the area of Chernihiv. And so I'll show you all that video. It's very self-explanatory. It's just a really small convoy. Also, I'd like to point out something really interesting, is that these Russian gas trucks look to be of an incredibly old kind. These aren't even like a KAMAZ or a Euro 4320, which is like the Euro 4320 is like one of their newest logistical trucks. This one looks to be a much older kind of logistical truck. If anyone wants to correct me on that, let me know, because I may be wrong, but that looks like one of the trucks that they would have produced in the 70s or the 80s, maybe. I don't know the exact kind, though, but it has that kind of 1980s Soviet style to it, if you know what I'm saying. You know what, before, because it's just the rest of the convoy, and in terms of a convoy size, it's not really large, but I'm going to go through here again, and let's see how many fuel trucks we could see. So we got two, okay, so we're going to skip forward a little bit, 3, and we got a 4th one, we've got a 5th one, We've got a 6th one. We got a 7th. We have 7 fuel trucks. Okay, if there was another fuel truck in front of that BMP-3, I am once again correct that the exact number that they put fuel trucks they put in the convoy is 8. If it's 7, it's pretty close, but it's not exactly right. So that doesn't really count. But still, if there's 8 of them, I did a whole bunch of logistical calculations, and I said a single BTG per day is going to require 8 fuel trucks to fill them up from the bottom to the brim. And so if that is correct, and that's what we're seeing here, is that they had 7 or 8 fuel trucks, then that number was dead on, that it takes exactly 8 fuel trucks to supply a BTG. Now, once again, I have to preface this one with, maybe it takes more or less, and they're just putting a large amount of them in the same convoy. I don't really know, but nonetheless, every time we see a group of Russian fuel trucks destroyed or Russian fuel trucks moving in a video, they're always in a group of around 7 to 8 at this point. And so maybe I was dead on with the fuel measurements as to how much a BTG needs to operate per day. And if I am, that's really crazy that I got that right with some quick figuring. So anyways, moving on from that, we're going to move on to Mykolaiv, and I believe this is going to... Yes, this will wrap up all of the news for today, and then we'll go to the questions. So we've seen today that there have been some captured Russian supply trucks. I'm going to show you all that real quick. As you can see, these are kind of like the newer Kamaz trucks. And you see what I'm talking about now. Those other trucks looked pretty old compared to these. And I'll show you all a Ural 4320. So that way y'all can see that one as well, because that, it would be good to know what they're using that they call new. This is what is new according to the Russian army. This is a Ural 4320 and what it looks like. And you can get all kinds of variations of it, like what looks like a logging truck. There's a lot of civilian versions of this truck as well, but the Russian military is supposedly replacing their older trucks with these, and we can tell obviously that the other trucks in that video were definitely not a Ural 4320, so they were a much older version of a logistical truck, and maybe might even carry less fuel. Also, looking at a little bit right here, to just take a better look at this, we've got a mortar on the back of this Kamaz, and then we also have ammo crates inside the Kamaz truck. And so we might be able to assume that these were supply trucks, but they weren't supply trucks in a logistical unit. They were supply trucks for a mortar battery of some sort. But that's all assumptions. This may actually be a logistical unit and they were carrying a mortar to somewhere else. But I believe it may actually be a mortar battery that they've captured here. And so nonetheless, it's just 3 captured Kamaz. One of them had a heavy mortar attached, along with some ammo crates. And so we're believing, and it may be true, that this is a mortar battery instead of a logistical unit. But who knows? We'll just have to see if that holds up to scrutiny. If anyone would like to scrutinize that and look into it, I would like for that, so that way I can make sure that that is an accurate statement. So anyways, moving on, we can see that there are some Russian prisoners that have been captured at Mykolaiv today. Show you all the video.
Куда вы приехали, блядь?
And so that's the video. It's just a large group of Russians. It looks like maybe a platoon-sized unit that was captured. And then we can also see more of them here. It may be the same group, or it may be a different one that was captured at Mykolaiv. But these are some of the Russian prisoners of war.
Должны были поехать на неизвестный полигон Джанкой на учения. В итоге нас завезли в страну Украину. Нас завезли и нам сказали, что отступать нельзя, либо своих застрелят.
I believe that may actually be the same group, perhaps. I'm not really sure. But moving on from that, we've got a couple of other things to see in the area of Mykolaiv today. We've seen that the forces in Mykolaiv have captured some equipment. It appears to be just a wide array of some of the lighter Russian armored personnel carrier infantry fighting vehicle kind of vehicles.
Сьогоднішні трофеї.
This one really has an odd camouflage layout to it, and I'd like to know if anyone could do a little bit of research on this and figure out why it has such a weird, like, yellow-green camouflage. It's very odd.
Бригада.
A lot of them have it, actually.
Даже пайки не встигли з'їсти.
Oh, maybe the Ukrainians are painting it yellow so that way they can get rid of the Z's, because you can see a Z under that and they painted it yellow. So maybe they're repurposing. Yeah, that's exactly what they're doing. It's the Ukrainians doing that so that way they can make sure that these aren't mistaken for Russian vehicles. So it's not a camouflage scheme. It's actually the Ukrainians doing that to make sure that a friendly fire doesn't occur. So moving on from that, we have, I believe, one more thing to cover. Yes, we have one more thing to cover, and it's this right here. We've seen more captured Russian equipment near Mykolaiv. I'll show you all that right now. Actually, wait a minute, this is the same one. Yeah, so it's the same mortar battery logistical unit, maybe, that was captured. For some reason, it was duplicated, which is really weird because we have it right here, then we have it here. That's really weird. I believe that one was actually supposed to be a different link, but nonetheless, apparently the link changed, or I kept the same one and I thought I copied another one, and it actually was me pasting the same one into that. So anyways, we've actually covered all the news around the world and inside of Ukraine today. So with that, we're going to answer as many of the questions as possible. So what do we got, Drew?
So first up, Mike Howell, chipping in 30 bucks to the channel, says, first time watching your content, looks great. Been looking for an independent source that filters out the propaganda. Wish I would have found you 2 weeks ago.
Well, thank you very much for the support, man. A lot of people have been saying that this channel is independent, and while I do try and keep the reporting side of things as unbiased as possible, I do support Ukraine entirely, 100%, and I don't believe that the Russians really have any basis to be doing what they're doing, but I am glad that it's this is viewed as neutral, and I'm trying to keep it as neutral as possible in every regard, as in talking about American politics and the actual situation of the war. I do support the Ukrainians and I side with them, and so my statements are clearly pro-Ukrainian whenever I talk about any situation going on there, but I do try and keep the actual view of how this war is going as unbiased as possible, to actually look at it through a more mathematical and methodical approach than one that's based in emotions, because that can get into a realm where you're not really saying what's true and you're just saying what you want to believe, and I don't really like doing that because it can lead to a lot of issues in the future. But anyways, I thank you very much for your support. And so, next question.
Squeezing in a question that's not a donation question, but just to get a little of the other stuff sprinkled in. Canna Michelle asks, what about Odessa? Any news today?
We have not gotten any news on Odessa. As far as we know, nothing has happened. But we do have news from yesterday on day 12, which is these dots in blue, that an MLRS engaged a unit at sea, and then apparently it caught a ship on fire, and supposedly a corvette, a Russian corvette, was sank that night or that day, and they say that it's the Vasily Baikov, but I don't really know because I haven't gotten a lot of information to back that up. In the video that we saw last night made it look like it was a different kind of ship. We don't really know exactly what kind, but we know that it didn't really look like the Vasily Baikov, at least on its silhouette, as it was damaged and burning at sea. So that being said, I don't have any news from Odessa, but once again, I thank you very much for your support. Next question.
Next up, RI chipping in 1999 says, if Russia takes over the Ukraine and NATO gets involved, will this be World War III? Agenda 2030 ? Revelation coming to pass ?
I don't really know. I mean, like, if Russia did take over Ukraine, I don't believe there would be a war with NATO. We would probably see Russia take everything from Crimea down this road, the E105, all the way from Kharkiv down the E105 to Dnipro, Zaporizhia, and then down here to Crimea. And they would probably try and make a natural border across the Dnieper River down here, and then kind of like an artificial border on the E105. And then the rest of Ukraine would fall under some kind of puppet state that would be much like Belarus and how they support Russia, and they're really just Russia's puppet. So that way they would have a border area, well, kind of like a buffer zone. That's a better description of it. And between NATO and them. I don't really think it would lead to World War III, and I don't really know about the Revelation stuff, but I do like that you're a thrifty guy and you made the donation $19.99. I like that number. So thank you very much for the donation, and I hope that answered your question as best as possible. So next question.
Next up, Roger Harris chipping in $50 says, "Keep up the good work."
Well, thank you very much for the $50 of support, man. I thank you very much. It's a huge honor to have people supporting this channel to that degree, and I seriously cannot thank everyone enough. I just can't really believe that this is how it's gone tonight, and I just thank y'all all so much. So once again, I mean, I've said this 5 times now, but thank you. Thank you very much. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
DJ Shadow Mine chipping in $10 says, "The Chinese state news are embedded with the Russians now. Do you think that may cause a false flag for China to get involved?"
No, I don't think it would. I don't really know a lot about the situation, but I can say with almost like assuredness, no, because there's currently Americans that are reporting on the Russian side, and you may have seen them. You know, like they look like about the dumbest kind of people, and that's just kind of my opinion on them. Y'all might think different. Maybe they're just misguided people. They may be. But they look pretty dumb, and they're over there, and they're supporting the Russian side. And if MLRS happened to smack down a missile, well, not a missile, a rocket right by him and turn that guy into a mist, America wouldn't join in on the side of the Russians. And right now, the Chinese have to weigh the situation incredibly carefully, because if they do get involved, they see that the sanctions are rather dire and very severe. And so I don't think they'd really like to take a hit to their economy, which they've been carefully and very intelligently growing over the past decade. So I don't really think they'd like to compromise that. And so I do not believe I don't think, and this is just my opinion, so I might be wrong, I don't think if a Chinese journalist was killed in Ukraine that they would get involved, because it's kind of understood the risk that they're taking going into a war zone and reporting. No one's really guaranteeing their safety. So I don't really think it would lead to that in terms of the Chinese. But once again, I thank you very much for your support. And so next question.
Louis Salmeron, and my apologies if I mispronounce your last name or the second part of your username, chipping in $49.99 says, "Thank you for your work."
Well, thank you very much. I'm very appreciative of your support. I thank you very much. I hope you joined the Discord and you joined the community. I'm sure you already have. And if you haven't, well, then welcome. And once again, thank you so much for the support. And so next question.
Serge Ivanov, chipping in 10 Canadian, says, "Seems like Putin lost this war. However, knowing this guy, he will never accept the loss. Will he use the nukes to say the last word? And how do you think the West would react?"
In my opinion, it could go really either way. I think I laid this out the best way I possibly could in one of the last questions. But I don't believe he would. He might. He's acting unpredictable at the moment, and as we know, he has not suffered a defeat yet during his entire career. So I'm not really sure. I mean, like, it could really go many ways at this point. They could use a nuke. It would be unprecedented to use a nuke on a regional power that has no nuclear arms themselves. And I don't really, and of course, I mean, obviously, we're already not reacting to them well at all. I mean, like, to the point that most Western companies have completely shut down operating business inside of Russia. I do not believe that we'd actually see them use nukes, and if they did, I don't think that the Western response would just be kind of like, that's a shame, because we can already see how strong the response is right now. I feel like that would escalate into something. I can't really even say what. Like, would it escalate into conventional warfare with Russia? Or would we start a nuclear onslaught against Russia and just hope that they can't launch the missiles in time? Although we know that that's nearly impossible. They would detect them and then launch theirs in retaliation. I don't really know. I really can't give a solid answer on that, but my opinion is that they probably wouldn't use nukes, and so I don't really think it'll lead to that anyways, but who really knows? So, and once again, thank you for your support, and we're going to move on to the next question.
So this is just a comment coming from me as far as the unprecedented nature of using nukes against a non-nuclear state, excluding World War II, obviously. Next question, Knuckles chipping in 1999. Don't get me wrong, I don't support Russia, but I also don't have a good feeling about Vlad personally. One minute he's saying they have destroyed so much, but then continue to say they need more. He also likes the spotlight.
I think he's talking about Volodymyr Zelensky.
Could be.
Because if he's saying Vlad, then he's talking about Vladimir Lenin. So I think if he's talking about Volodymyr Zelensky, I can't really blame the guy though for being in the spotlight, because if you look at World War II, you know, with Winston Churchill, I mean, like, he was like that a lot as well. And Winston Churchill was known famously for getting himself in very dangerous situations. So, you know, I really can't blame the guy. I mean, like, and I don't really think he likes the limelight. I think he's really just out there speaking every day to an international audience, trying to at least rile somebody to tell someone to get involved. And I think really his whole entire like spotlight thing that you're talking about is really him just trying his hardest to get the most support for Ukraine possible in such a dire time of need. Because if he wasn't doing that, like, just imagine if he was like the president of Afghanistan for a minute back last year, and he just got up and actually accepted the U.S. offer to go into exile, and he just said, yeah, I'm going to go to the airport, hop on a plane, and leave. Like, imagine how bad of a leader he would have been then. I mean, like, even if it is a bad thing for him to be in the spotlight and try and relish in it, I don't really think he is, but even if that was the case, he's doing it in the best interest of his country. So I really can't like shame him for that, if you see what I'm saying. But anyways, I thank you for your support. And next question.
And just to comment, I'm seeing dozens of people saying that he's most likely talking about Putin. However, I haven't seen the original commenter clarify. Next question coming in from P.G, chipping in 999, asks, have Ukraine made any recent counterattack as well liberated some city, town, or land? Can NATO send... Oh, it's a multiple part. Can NATO send in outdated / old tanks like M60, Chieftain, Leopard? If so, will Putin be annoyed to see them?
To address the tanks, and I'll have to go over this part by part, so I'll just address that one first, and then we'll circle around to the front of the question again. But to address the tanks, I don't really think there are any chieftains in service anymore, so I don't really think they'd be sending those. But I could see the Germans sending some of the older Leopard 2A4s if they do have them. I don't really know the exact numbers of foreign arsenals at the moment, but I could see them sending those, and I don't really think that would anger the Russians a lot. And on top of that, I don't really think they would be effective, really, because when you think about it, all the Ukrainian tankers are trained on one kind of style of tank, and it's the Eastern, Russian kind of style T-64, T-80, or some sort of tank like that. And so they would bring over these Western tanks, and, regardless whatever kind they are, none of the Ukrainian tank crews would have any training on them. And the amount of time it would take to train them on that tank to make sure they could effectively crew it would be so long that the war would probably be over, whether it's to Ukraine's detriment or success by that time. So I don't really think that the tanks would be anything that's effective anyways, and I don't really think if we did do that, Putin would be extra pissed at that, because we're already sending in anti-tank weapons, which I believe would probably be doing more than tanks at this point. So that being said, what was the first part of that question again?
First part of the question, I don't know if this was put through a translator because it is a little blocky, but I'm reading it word for word. Have Ukraine made any recent counterattack as well liberated some city, town, or land?
As in recently, I'm going to span back over the course of a few days. They did make a counterattack here on the western side of Kyiv. According to my information, the entire western side of the city was surrounded, and they busted through in an unprecedented counterattack from inside the city, busted through and opened up the M06 again, and then pushed the Russians back up into the area of Bucha and Irpin. Alpine, I believe is how it's correctly pronounced, although I can't really get that right. And I believe that this front line here near Oblon has actually been pushed back as well to some degree, but I don't really know how much, and so the front line hasn't changed in that degree. But one thing that was crazy, and I thought, and this tells me that the Ukrainians can hold, is that the Russians made it as far as the Kyiv Zoo in the first few days of the fighting, and then they got pushed all the way out of the city. So that does tell me that the Ukrainians have been making incredible strides defending the capital city, while they have been taking some land losses down here. But I don't really believe these land losses are critically important, because most of this here that I expect them to lose in between the yellow line, which will show their at least proposed defensive line, although it's probably not accurate. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I'm really not going to go either way on that. But they're falling back from this Russian front line, which is in red, and they're not really losing anything important in between this red line and the Ukrainian yellow defensive line. So as far as losses, they're not really losing anything important right now. And as far as gains, land gains, they're gaining a lot up around the capital. And so with that, I thank you for your support, and hopefully that answered the question. And now we're going to move on to the next question.
So Bug versus Windshield, with a second donation for a combined total of $15, says, speaking of Churchill, he got promoted from Chamberlain's failure with Czechoslovakia by appeasement. Does that work today?
Yikes. I mean, I'm to weigh in on that with America, if it's like an American perspective, it'd have to weigh in on American politics. And so I don't do that, sadly, on this channel, because I want the focus to be entirely on the Ukrainian war, and America's really a sideshow in this. It's kind of like an external kind of like power in this, but it's not really as important or needs to be as detailed in its explanation as what's happening in Ukraine. So in that regard, I couldn't answer that question. But here in Kyiv, actually, no, I really can't really answer that question anywhere, come to think of it, because there's really not a lot of countries going for the appeasement route. Because if you look at World War II with Neville Chamberlain doing the appeasement route leading up to World War II, they never imposed economic sanctions on Germany, or anything for that matter, during the whole entire phase of appeasement. They just let Germany take the Sudetenland, annexed the Czech Republic, well, at least the Czech Republic area, and then Slovakia became a puppet country. They Anschlussed Austria. They did a whole bunch of stuff. They remilitarized the Rhine, and they never did anything. But in this regard, no one's really going with the appeasement route, because the sanctions on Russia, while Putin is saying it's almost a declaration of war, and that sounds really bizarre, the sanctions are so tough, they nearly are. I mean, there's never been a level of sanctions like this in world history, in between countries that aren't actively at war. And so I do have to say, to that degree, I'm actually somewhat pleased at this point with the American response in terms of economic sanctions, because they've been dire and incredibly severe to the Russian economy. So hopefully that answers the question the best I can. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
Okay, so I'm going to address a bulk of commenters who donated. However, they didn't have attached questions. We have Pain Train 36 chipped in $49.99. Thank you very much. We have Steve Blanchard chipping in $20. We have Caffeine chipping in $4.99. That's enough to get you another coffee. And then we got Martin Van Owen chipping in $1 Canadian. I'm mispronouncing this and I apologize. Cirid, I can't do it. Chipping in $1.99. We got Alicia chipping in 99 cents. We got James Job chipping in $4 and $2 and $1. And then this is a mistake on my part. Earlier, we had somebody chip in approximately $3 worth of Filipino pesos, and I lost the question, and I apologize that I don't even know who the username was. This is a very new experience for me, trying to manage this many questions with dollars attached to them. So thank you again, everybody who's chipping in.
By the way, how many questions are backed up right now?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, about 10 or so.
Okay, so I would like to request this real quick from the viewers. If y'all could stop donating, the stream will end soon, and I don't want anyone to donate and then go without answering their question. So if y'all would like to stop donating, please do, because I don't think I'll be able to answer the questions, or else the stream will go on forever. And I I have to get some sleep, y'all know, because I've hardly get any sleep, and luckily coffee helped me out today. But just make sure to not really donate anymore. I thank everyone for their donations so far, and if you do want to donate, that's fine. There's always tomorrow's stream and the next day's stream, but I don't want y'all's questions to go unanswered. So if y'all could stop donating now, I would be highly appreciative, so that way I don't end up just leaving people hanging. And so with that, let's move on to the remaining questions, and let's get those knocked out.
So Knuckles again, who had asked the question about Vlad showing up on TV without specifying, chipping in $9.99, says, I heard Russia has nukes that are extremely small and even small enough where they can come in right after. If that's the case, do you think that would get the US involved if they were used? Little tactical nukes.
Yeah, kind of like that. I'm supposing that he's talking about like nuclear weapons the size of a Davy Crockett or something like that. And if those
I suppose so.
And if those were used, I would assume so. I mean, if nukes were used of any kind, that's a severe escalation of the conflict, from conventional warfare to a level of warfare that's unprecedented before. The only time it happened before was in World War II. And at that point, nukes had never been used, and the precedent for how nukes were supposed to be used wasn't really laid out. So that kind of got a pass for its usage. But in the modern world, a nuke is an unforgivable sin. And so I believe even smaller tactical nukes, like Davy Crockett sized, just as like a basis for like the kilotonnage of one of those nuclear bombs or atomic bombs or whatever their actual name is, I believe that would lead to direct involvement from the West as well. So I hope that answers the question. And once again, thank you for the support. You've been a supporter of multiple questions tonight, and so I thank you as much as everyone else. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
Okay. So Taz Devil chipped in $10 with no question attached. Thank you, Taz Devil. Next question from Ben Fran, chipping in $5, says, do you foresee a swift boat type of Russian activity like the Vietnam War via the Dnieper River?
The Dnieper? It's a hard thing to pronounce, so I understand completely if you can't. It took me a while to get that down, but no, I don't, because there's very little they can go up, because right here, there's a dam, and there's no way, I believe this is a lock, if I'm correct, right here. But rather than that lock, and that's like a point where the boats have to stop for like 20 minutes or so and just sit stationary. And so the Ukrainian Air Force could just routinely fly up to these locks and bomb them, or better yet, the Ukrainians could preemptively destroy these locks, so that way these reservoirs empty out at a slower pace than it would if there was a breach in the dam. And then, well, yeah, I mean, then I guess the little swift boats would have kind of like a free reign on the river, but right now I don't really see how that would be feasible. But I bet there may be a way. Now that I'm thinking about it, I'm starting to try and jog my brain on how this would work. There may be a way to actually make this a feasible thing to use swift boats on the Dnieper River. So that being said, maybe. And I'm sorry I couldn't really answer that question too well. Because as far as I know, the Mekong Delta didn't have any dams in it or reservoirs, so they didn't have to combat that. But all along the Dnieper River, everywhere you see like a very wide body of water, there's a dam on it. Like right here, further down that I already showed, there's one right here. I mean, the whole entire river is covered in dams. And so operating swift boats up and down that river would rely around having to work around these dams. And so I hope that answers the question kind of well, and I'm sorry it wasn't really a good one. And with that, also thank you for your support, by the way. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
Mark Bohaychuk chips in $10 and asks, did you say more donations?
No, less. I don't want to go without, I don't want to leave people hanging with questions that they've donated to the channel, because I can't really provide anything at the moment for donations rather than my answers. And so I would feel like I was leaving people hanging and wasn't really providing them with what they were looking for if, they just donated with a question and then I left. So I don't want that to happen. And it's already going over time right now. We're about 2 hours and 20 minutes in, and usually these end around 2 hours and 10 minutes in. So no more donations, please. Nobody add any more donations unless if you're expecting for just the goodness of giving one, I guess. And y'all don't really worry if I answer the question or not. If y'all want to do that, that's fine, because the stream's probably going to end in about 10 minutes. Whatever you want to do, just know that I might not be able to answer the questions if they're coming in like 2 or 3 minutes out. So that being said, next question.
So you've got about 10 questions left. Let's see if we can do one a minute. Zero Pain, shipping in $5, asks, can Ukraine trust any peace deal that Putin agrees to with his track record of breaking them? Just like how the Allies could never trust Hitler during World War II.
I don't really think the Ukrainians would have a choice, because it's either they accept the peace deal or they continue with the war. And the war is in neither side's interest. It's not like Ukraine is hunky-dory right now, in this war. Although they are holding them, it's not really a good situation for a country for theirs to be in for long. It's really not good for either of them to be in this war very long. And so they would have to accept the peace deal or otherwise deal with a prolonged war that they will, just due to the amount of time and the amount of resources the Russians have on paper. There would be a point where the war would go on so long that the Ukrainians could not go on, even with as much support as they're getting from the West. And so I would believe that there would be a point where this war would end, because they would have to accept some kind of peace. And so I thank you very much for your support. And next question.
VMan29397 chips in $5 and asks, do you see similarities between this conflict and the Winter War? To me, it seems like a 21st century Winter War.
Yes, I've actually said that a lot, and Drew's been my mod, and so I know he's been around to hear me say this time and time again. But this is almost exactly like the Winter War, but in a 21st century style with a 21st century flair. The logistical lines are the same. There's multiple kind of like advances and I guess you could call fronts happening at the same time with different logistics. Like logistical units and systems tied to them, and that was exactly what happened in the Winter War. And as we can see, it was so complicated the Russians really couldn't get a good handle or organization on it, and their logistics fell apart, and then their army promptly fell apart as well, and the Finnish just practically destroyed them for the amount of casualties they took versus what the Russians took. So I thank you very much for your support, and I hope that answers the question. I'm sorry it's brief, but we're trying to wrap up the stream here. But I'm glad that I'm very thankful for your support. And so we're going to move on to the next question.
Esprecial chips in an additional $10, and in the voice of Philip J. Fry says, shut up and take my money. And Commander Sonak chips in another $10 and says, yes, take my money.
Oh my
Next
Lord.
question. We have the the dude chipping in 5 Canadian. It says, by the way, it's me, Last Lord, on Discord. If you did not know, if Pavel can't donate, I will for him.
Oh, wow, that's very nice of him.
Jacob, Cibula, chipping in $5, reports of Russian military not wanting to repatriate their dead. Real story?
It is a real story, actually. I saw something, but I didn't include it because I couldn't get a location, and I didn't want to put it under the location unknown, because dealing with deaths, I want to make sure the location is confirmed. But the Ukrainians were burying Russian soldiers themselves in a mass grave, and it looked like there was about 30 caskets inside of this mass grave. So yes, it looks like they're really not picking up the bodies, and it looks like the Ukrainians are actually doing the work of burying the Russian dead. So that being said, I hope that answers the question. And next question.
Next question comes from Ski XD, chipping in $5. Says, everyone make sure you subscribe and like the video. Let's get him up there in the YouTube algorithm. Glory to Ukraine.
Slava Ukraina. And thank you very much for the support. Next question.
Phoenix spelled oddly, chipping in $5 Australian, I believe, says, how does this end? You seem to think their logistics is completely failing. What happens in your view when Putin gets desperate?
If Putin got desperate, there's really nothing he can do next to nuking him. And that's why I'm always saying, while I think it wouldn't happen, it could happen, because who knows? I mean, he's acting unhinged. He's acting pretty crazy. So that might happen. But I believe if he got desperate, he would just have to kind of like suck it up and just take the loss. Because if this war goes on for much longer, the Russians are still they're going to be in a worse position than they are now if they can't sort out the logistical failures. And so I really don't think there's much Putin could do besides nuking Ukraine to kind of like save face if he got desperate, and that wouldn't really be saving face anyways. But I hope that answers the question, and I thank you very much for the support. And so next question.
Next question comes in from username a random tip, chipping in $5, asks, how many Russian soldiers have been killed and how many Ukrainian soldiers have been killed? Do you have this information by any chance?
I don't have the information on the Ukrainian numbers. Also, thank you for the support. But I don't have the numbers for the Ukrainians. But I do have the numbers for the Russians according to what the Ukrainians are claiming. And they claim around 12,000 Russian soldiers have been killed, while the Americans are claiming that it's probably around 6,000 to 7,000. And the Russians are claiming, excuse me, that they only lost about 584 at this point. So the numbers are all across the board, but I have to believe that the estimate's somewhere actually in between the American estimate and the Ukrainian estimate, and it's probably somewhere around 10,000 to 8,000, somewhere in that range. So I hope that answers the question. And next question.
Next question comes in from Caffeine, who had donated earlier, chipping in another $4.99. Says, "Don't want my money. Tough expletive deleted. What kind of coffee am I buying you? Better not be Charbucks."
No, you're just buying me pike roast from the Keurig upstairs. That's all. I mean, it's not expensive stuff. It's just pike roast with some creamer and sugar. And hopefully that doesn't give the Russians any ideas of how to pour poison into my drinks. Considering that these streams appear to be doing incredibly well and giving a decent amount of information about what the Russians are doing and where they are and what's happened to them. So that being said, thank you for the support and thank you for the second coffee. And next question.
So third coffee coming in from Caffeine. This is from earlier in the stream. I've kind of been sorting these by donation amount just so that there's some sort of format and that it's equitable, and obviously so that the people who are, putting their money where their mouth is are getting responses quickly. Of course, thank you to everybody. Caffeine asks, can you explain to these knuckleheads that a biolab is not a bio-warfare facility? I'm sick of these conspiracies.
I can't even answer that question for you really, because I don't know where the biolabs are coming from. I've heard a lot about them, but does anyone really think that Russia would go to war with Ukraine and waste billions of dollars just to missile strike a couple of biolabs? I mean, if that's like a real thing, I mean, wouldn't there be biolabs everywhere? Wouldn't they just launch cruise missiles at every biolab around the world that the United States is partly associated with or funds? I mean, I see a lot of problems with the biolabs thing, and I really don't know about the biolabs in the first place. So I can agree with you. I mean, I wish people would kind of stop talking about them and focus more on the strategic situation. Because the strategic situation is a lot more important than the kind of conspiracy theory background stuff. So I thank you very much once again for the third coffee, and with that we're going to move on to the next question.
Next question comes in from James Lynn, chipped in $2, asks, or states rather, every Russian BTG apparently has a heavy mortar platoon attached.
Oh really? I did not know that. That's really good to know. So that means that that little group that we saw near Mykolaiv was probably attached to a BTG and got destroyed, and didn't get destroyed. They abandoned the vehicles in some kind of firefight because it did look like a decent amount of them had taken damage. So that's good to know. Thank you for letting us know that. And so, and also thank you for the support. And so we're going to move on to the next question.
So that does conclude the donation attached questions. There are 2 donations that had no questions attached. This is Zulu chipping in $2 and then another $2. And then Martin Van Osini chipped in 2 Canadian. I do have a few questions on standby just from the general chat if you have any interest in taking on additionals.
I think we'll take on 3 because I want to answer as many people's questions as possible, and I don't really want it to become a precedent where people have to pay to get the questions answered. So we'll answer 3 of them because this stream has gone on a really long time, and then we're going to wrap it up. And I just want everyone to know. I just want everyone to know, and I want to make this clear too. If you donate at this point, I hate to say this, but I won't be able to answer the question. So that being said, we're going to answer the last 3, and then we're going to wrap up this stream. So what's the first question?
Badboy0450 says, 1 question, if Ukraine does get these planes, where would they put them?
They would probably, I don't really know. That's a really good question. I mean, we could pull up, I'll pull up if I have the time, because I'm very busy right now, but if I can, I'm going to pull up where some airfields are and see which ones are in the best conditions. And it's probably going to be the airfields that are in the best condition, or they might try and pull a really smart move, which is probably put them in airfields that have already been hit, because the Russians will probably try and hit the airfields that are in the best condition next, instead of double tapping airbase that's already almost down and out. So I don't know. I mean, like, I know that they'll be at a military airfield, or they may even be at a civilian airfield, or they may do something that military is trained for, which is operating them from a roadway. I don't really know, and I really can't answer, because there's so much leeway and room that they can use to, move around these aircraft. They can operate from roads, civilian airports, or military airports. So I'm sorry I really can't answer that question, but I hope I answered it as good as possible. And so next question.
Okay, this one came in. There's, of course, a time delay between what you and I are hearing and then what the viewers are seeing. Splodemaster snuck in a 1999 donation, I think, before the cutoff, asking, should the focus be on disrupting the supply chain, and do you think the Ukrainians have enough intel on the stalled chains? A truck is easier to destroy than a tank, after all.
Okay, so thank you for the support. And yes, I believe that the Ukrainians focusing on the logistics is much more important than focusing on the vehicles. Of course, trucks are easier to destroy. They're soft targets compared to a tank. And so you can destroy them with a lot less effort, and I guess a lot less cost. So it's much more cost effective to even attack the logistical units. And it also is more effective, at least in my opinion, strategically, to attack the logistics instead of the military units. And so what was the middle part of that question again, to make sure I cover that?
It was just a statement saying that trucks are easier to destroy than tanks. Or rather, do you think the Ukrainians have enough intel on the stalled supply chains?
I think they do. I mean, like, the U.S. And private companies are providing a lot of satellite pictures to them about these large stalled convoys, like the 40-mile long convoy that's still sitting there right now. It's like day 5 of them sitting still, and they get a lot of info and data on them. And they're currently trying to destroy the fronter, like the most forward points in the convoy at the moment. So yes, I do think they get a pretty decent amount of information about the situation on the ground for the Russians, as far as satellite pictures can tell. So I hope that answers the question, and thank you for your support. And due to that question being asked, we're only going to answer one more question, and then the stream will wrap up. So the last question.
Final question comes in from John E. McCormick, who asks, do you see historic comparison to either Operation Barbarossa or Battle of the Bulge, Kyiv being Bastogne? Hashtag good vibes.
Thank you very much, by the way, for the support, saying good vibes and everything. I'm very happy that I make a good stream, and very good quality for the viewers, and I'm very thankful and appreciative that everyone likes it. But I don't really see the similarity in between the Battle of Bastogne and Kyiv, because Bastogne was surrounded, and then the Americans had to try and break back through the German advance, the German bulge, back towards Bastogne. But right now at Kyiv, it's actually not surrounded on any side, and there's just fighting in the northern area. And this front line may even be further back towards Chernihiv, but it's down here because I don't really have any information. It's kind of a gray area right now. But I don't really think it's a lot like Bastogne, and maybe it's like Operation Barbarossa. But Operation Barbarossa worked at a lightning fast pace, and this operation is moving incredibly slow. So, I mean, maybe, logistically, yes, because the Germans underestimated the Soviet defense and thought they could overrun the 3 major points, Leningrad, Moscow, and Stalingrad, within the first year, and then they didn't. So, in that regard, yes, I think so. And so hopefully I've answered that question well enough. And sadly, it is time to end. And if anyone's watching who donated, I have to thank you all once again. I cannot believe that this many people have donated, and the amount that y'all have. It shows that I have a lot of support for the channel. And I thank you all so much, because it means a lot to me, and it tells me that I am going in a good direction with the content. And it's always good to get affirmation that the content is being viewed well by the viewers, and that people are respecting my neutrality in certain regards. And I thank you all very much for that. And I also thank all the other viewers who've been watching who didn't donate. I'm very glad for all of your views as well. And I thank you all so much for watching, because I really cherish each and every one of my viewers, because y'all could go watch an entirely different channel elsewhere. And so that being said, I thank you all so much. I hope y'all join the Discord and donate to charitable causes in Ukraine. There's also a link to the map that was used in this video in the description below that you can take a look at for yourselves. And you can also go check out the Ukraine Reddit, because there's a link there. And that being said, I thank y'all all very much. The stream will run again at 10 p.m. Eastern Time tomorrow, and I will see y'all all around. Slava Ukraina!